Chapter 10:16. Crackle, 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 crackle. The sound of trees being burned rang out in the dense sea of flames, reverberating in the forest that had suddenly lost all other sounds. Ugh, Versilia let out a bitter groan. Her body was spasming. Her entire body was engraved with ferocious scar-like brands. It was quite a shocking sight. If he were to count them, it would be a meaningless matter. There were at least dozens of runes engraved on Versilia's body, if not hundreds of them, then there were at least dozens of them. This didn't even include the runes engraved on Versilia's body. If one were to count the runes in Versilia's body, such as the runes in her heart, there would be at least 100 of them. Ordinary elven envoys might have a mental breakdown in an instant after engraving even a single rune on them. Versilia, on the other hand, had not only engraved the runes on her heart, but she had also implanted hundreds of runes all over her body. The side effects of all the runes added together could kill hundreds or thousands of elven envoys, let alone one elven envoys, right? However, even though Versilia's mind was devoured by the runes and she lost her mind, she still held on and didn't die. The reason was because of a single obsession. Lien. A subtle, the soft voice from Versilia's mouth contained the root of all the obsessions in her heart. Hearing this voice, Lien's hand that was holding onto the elven envoy subconsciously tightened. She lowered her head and slowly walked towards Versilia, arriving in front of her. Lien. A subtle. Versilia seemed to have recovered a bit of consciousness. She raised her eyes with difficulty and cast her gaze towards Lien. Versilia. Lotus looked into Versilia's eyes. Just this point alone made Versilia's pained expression soften a lot. 3 years ago, the strongest sword dancer had defeated Versilia with a single strike. Versilia didn't even exist in her eyes. Because of this, Versilia had developed such a deep obsession, all for the sake of making Lien acknowledge her. At this moment, Lien's clear eyes were indeed looking at Versilia. Just this point alone was enough to make Versilia overjoyed, with a hint of bitterness. In the end, even so, I still couldn't defeat you. Hearing this, Lien shook her head. You're wrong, Versilia. You're much stronger than me. Heh. Versilia laughed at herself. Are you trying to comfort me? The one who answered Versilia was not Lotus, but Noah. She's telling the truth. Noah also came in front of Versilia and stood side by side with Lotus. He looked down at Versilia from the corner of his eyes. At the very least, there isn't a single elven user who can withstand over 100 spells without dying like you, not even the strongest sword dancer. Lotus nodded and said to Versilia. Although you've once walked the wrong path, I've seen how tenacious your will is. That's why, Versilia, I must tell you that you're truly very strong, even stronger than me. Versilia's eyes trembled. She looked at the man and woman standing in front of her, holding a pure white holy sword and a pitch-black magic sword. She slowly closed her eyes. In the end, what remained on Versilia's face was satisfaction and calmness. She no longer had the coldness and stubbornness of the past. Seeing this, Lotus couldn't help but step forward. Don't worry. Noah voiced out Lotus's concern. Versilia isn't dead yet. But... Lotus looked at Noah. She still has spells on her body. Ace has the highest level of spell resistance that can even erase elven spells. Noah raised the holy sword in his hand. With Ace's power, he should be able to erase all the spells on Versilia's body. After saying that, Noah pressed the holy sword in his hand against Versilia's body, and he poured his divine might into her body. Brilliant white light shone from the holy sword in Noah's hand and enveloped Versilia's body. Chi! Under the brilliant white light, the spell runes all over Versilia's body that looked like ferocious scars seemed to be burned by flames. Light smoke rose from all over her body and gradually dissipated in the light smoke. Seeing this scene, Lien's expression eased. Impossible. On the other side, Vivian, the spell engraving merchant from the Skeleton Alliance, slowly stepped back. She looked at Versilia lying in front of Noah and Lotus with shock and fear on her face. How could I possibly lose to 1 or 2 elven envoys when I have so many runes and engravings? Indeed. Versilia's strength was at the peak of the elven user level. Even in the Elven Sword Dance Festival that gathered the best elven users under the age of 20, Versilia's strength was definitely at the highest level. Under such circumstances, coupled with the buffs of nearly 100 spells, not to mention ordinary elven users, even Grey and Vath, who were known as the strongest elven users on the continent, would have to suffer in front of Versilia, who had transformed into a violent beast. Versilia could no longer be called an elven user. However, such a Versilia was also not facing an ordinary elven user. Noah had a LV for ability value buff. His strength was comparable to Hercules in the current world in the form of a servant. His contracted elven was also the strongest existence among all sword elves. Lotus's body contained the power of the Dark Elf King. Her contracted elven user was also the highest-ranked Dark Elf who had the responsibility of guiding the Dark Elf King. To put it bluntly, whether it was Noah or Lotus, they had exceeded the strength of an elven user. In this way, even if Noah or Lotus, one of them could deal with Versilia alone, let alone working together. Unless Versilia could transplant over 1,000 spells and not die. Otherwise, it was really impossible to win against either Noah or Lotus. Not to mention, Noah had not used his hidden strength, and Lotus had not drawn out all the power of the Dark Elf King. This result was also natural. Vivian could only turn around in fear and wanted to run in the other direction of the forest. Whoosh! At this moment, an arrow made of ice brushed past Vivian's cheek and shot in front of Vivian. At the same time, it cut a wound on Vivian's cheek and nailed to the trunk of a tree in front of Vivian. Want to escape? Holding an ice crystal longbow, Linsley showed an elegant smile in Vivian's direction. Although I don't expect the merchants of the Skeleton Alliance to understand etiquette, since you didn't greet the host, as a guest, casually leaving the table is not a good habit. Vivian retreated in fear. Just as she was about to turn in another direction, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of her and blocked her way. They were night fairies who were fully equipped with pure white armor and wielded great swords and shields. Even if you are a merchant of the Skeleton Alliance, it is not easy to sneak into the territory of the Elven Academy, right? Viviana smiled sweetly at Vivian. In that case, it is so difficult to sneak in. Why don't you leave in such a hurry? Looking at the tall elf knight, Vivian retreated once again. However, at the same time, a long whip cut through the hot air and wrapped around Vivian's foot with a snap. Vivian instantly lost her balance and fell heavily to the ground, letting out a painful groan. It is all because of you that so many troublesome things have happened. Claire, who tightly grasped the handle of the long whip, shouted in a delicate voice. Watch me burn you to a crisp. Hearing this, before Vivian could react, a ceremonial spear suddenly appeared in front of her. Filthy merchant of the Skeleton Alliance, Alice looked down at Vivian and said coldly. You will use your whole life to atone for what you have done to my sister. Unprecedented despair and fear surged in Vivian's heart. She finally couldn't help but let out a terrified cry. Ah! The mournful scream echoed in the sea of fire in the forest for a long time. Chapter 10:17. Dusk gradually descended. Many people were gathered at the entrance of Alicia Elven Academy. It wasn't just the students of Alicia Elven Academy gathered here. There were also elven knights wearing the uniform of the Empire's Elven Knight Order. At this moment, these elven knights from the Empire were guarding the front of a carriage, waiting for someone to ride it. The person planning to ride the carriage was Versilia. Standing in front of the academy gates, Versilia's gaze swept past the group of girls in front of her. As far as Versilia's eyes could see, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were all present. Even Greyvath was present. Everyone, please go back, Versilia said to the group of people who were staring at her. I'm only a criminal now, not the strongest elven caster the Academy is proud of. I'm going to the Imperial capital to atone for my crimes. It's not worth it for you to send me off with such fanfare. Ever since the end of the Lambard War, transplanting runes had been seen as a taboo. If an elven caster transplanted a rune without permission, it was equivalent to a crime. Even if she was the strongest elven caster in Alicia Elven Academy, and the eldest daughter of the Duke of Frangelto family, who controlled the military lifeline of the Empire, Versilia still had to bear this crime. Thus, even if all the runes on Versilia's body were removed by Noah, this crime still couldn't be erased. Thus, Versilia was about to be sent to the Empire for trial. It was very likely that she would be sentenced to prison. Who knew how long it would take for her to be released? Even so, Versilia's face was still filled with calmness. She no longer had the persistence of the past. Under the erosion of so many runes, I'm quite satisfied to be able to survive like this. Versilia pursed her lips and smiled. She didn't look like a cold knight anymore. Instead, she looked like an ordinary girl. Originally, even if the runes were removed from my body, the accumulated side effects of the runes would erupt and make me bear all the consequences. It's all thanks to that man's help that I can stand here safe and sound. I should be satisfied. Speaking of which, it's really surprising, Claire exclaimed. You can actually recover so quickly after suffering so many side effects of the spell engraving. What did Noah do? I more or less saw the process. Linley thought back to what she had seen. It seems that after removing the runes on Versilia's body, Noah took out a bottle of potion? That's right. Versilia nodded. It's because I drank that potion that I could recover so quickly. Student Noah actually has such a miraculous thing? Fianna's eyes flashed with a sly light. It seems that there are many secrets hidden in his body. I really have to thank him. Alice couldn't help but smile. No matter what, it was because of him and Lena Subble that my sister was saved. Versilia's eyes. In the end, the two of them didn't come? Hearing Versilia's words, the girls fell silent. They knew that the two people Versilia was talking about were definitely Noah and Lotus. However, neither Noah nor Lotus appeared here to send Versilia off. However, thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem strange. Noah didn't get along with Versilia. He only came in contact with Versilia because of Lotus' request. It was also because of Alice's request that he joined hands with Lotus to save Versilia, remove the runes on Versilia's body, and even took out precious potions to help Versilia recover. Lotus, on the other hand, wanted to repay the sin of leading Versilia astray because of her. Versilia didn't have a direct relationship with Versilia, so she naturally wouldn't come. The latter was supposed to send Versilia off, more or less. But firstly, Lotus didn't enter Alicia Elven Academy through the proper channels. Secondly, Lotus was extremely disgusted with Gray and Vash. Now, Gray and Vash were here. It wasn't strange that Lotus didn't appear. However, regardless of whether it was Noah or Lotus, they had left a deep impression on Versilia in some way. It was natural that she wanted to see Noah and Lotus before going to the Imperial capital to be punished. Alright, you don't have to look like that. Seeing that the girls didn't know what to say, Versilia helplessly shook her head. I'm a sinner. With those two's nobility, they naturally shouldn't come here. Versilia didn't have any hatred for Lotus. On the contrary, Versilia, like the rest of the elves, looked forward to having Lotus as their daughter. In Versilia's opinion, Noah, who possessed the same sword dance as Lotus and whose strength was on par with Lotus, was also a noble figure. Therefore, this sentence was completely Versilia's true thoughts. Sister, Alice mustered up her courage and said to Versilia. I believe that no matter what kind of path you take next, those two will be watching you closely. Claire, Linley, and Fianna nodded as well, which made Versilia smile. That's what I hope too. Then, Versilia stepped forward and patted Alice's head. Alice, I'm looking forward to your performance at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Alice's eyes reddened as she felt the long-awaited gentleness and warmth from her sister. She suppressed the emotions in her heart and nodded heavily. Sister, I will definitely obtain the right to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and achieve results that don't disappoint the Frangerdo family's reputation as a knight. I believe in you. Versilia's face was filled with gentleness. Then, she looked at Gray and Vash and bowed. I'm really sorry, Gray and Vash. I've caused you trouble. Don't mind it. If you can still cause trouble, it means that you're still young. That's a good thing. Gray and Vash looked at Versilia. I only hope that you won't go down the wrong path in the future. Versilia Eva Frangerto will remember. Versilia nodded and looked around at everyone again. Then, everyone, I'll be leaving now. I hope to see you again in the future. After saying that, Versilia boarded the carriage without any hesitation. Under the escort of the Elven Knights, they began their journey. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and Gray and Vash stood side by side and watched the carriage leave. Sitting in the carriage, Versilia suddenly felt a gaze that made her look outside the window. She looked at the top of a building in Alicia Elven Academy. Over there, a young girl dressed in a witch costume stood against the wind, watching Versilia leave. At this moment, Versilia's heart felt like it was stuffed with something. She only felt satisfaction. Standing in the howling wind, Lotus watched the carriage carrying Versilia leave. Her gaze didn't move for even half a second. 3 years ago, for her own wish, Lotus didn't look directly at any of her opponents. She also didn't look directly at Versilia. This time, Lotus would watch Versilia leave. Since you're so worried, why don't you send Versilia off? A leisurely voice sounded from behind Lotus. Lotus wasn't surprised at all. She didn't even turn her head. Anyway, we'll meet again, right? Upon hearing Ren's answer, Noah, who had appeared behind her out of nowhere, curled his lips and smiled. You're quite humane. Aren't you the same? Lotus closed her eyes. Logically speaking, after being affected by the side effects of so many runes, even if Versilia's body was healed, her abilities as an elven user would still be affected. But you even healed this part. There's no need for that, right? You're thinking too much. That's because the effects of the recovery potion were too good. It has nothing to do with me. Noah shrugged and walked to Lotus' side and looked into the distance. Are you planning to leave? Chapter 10:18. Are you planning to leave? The howling wind drowned out this sentence, causing Noah's voice to disappear in an instant. If Lotus did not hear this, it would not be strange at all. Thus, Lotus remained silent and did not say anything. However, it was this attitude that made Noah understand. Lotus must have heard it. With regards to Lotus, Noah more or less had some understanding of her. Although she was very mysterious in all aspects, at the end of the day, this girl who was known as the strongest sword dancer, who enjoyed supreme glory and was worshipped by almost all the witches in the world, was actually just an ordinary girl. He would regret his past wrongdoings. She wanted to make up for her past mistakes. She cared about the safety of others. At the same time, she cared about others, took care of others, and did not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire for those close to her. Otherwise, there was no need for Lotus to return to Alicia Elf Academy because of Versilia's matter. Otherwise, there was no need for Lotus to help Fayanna solve the problem of contracting a spirit because of their past interactions. In short, this girl who was extremely famous in this world, in Noah's opinion, was a good person. However, Lotus also had a lot of responsibilities on her shoulders. For example, the good and bad that came with the title of the strongest sword dancer. For example, the power of the Dark Elf King. For example, the world fragment that existed in Lotus's body and fundamentally changed Lotus' fate. These things made Lotus destined to have an extraordinary life. Noah's relationship with the world was not small. In Noah's opinion, since Lotus' fate changed because of the world fragment, then he had the responsibility to bear all of Lotus' fate. It was because of this that Noah agreed to Lotus's request and helped her test Versilia. However, because he understood Lotus's character, Noah was even more troubled. Now, the world fragment was with Noah. If Noah wanted to take it back, he could not say that he could at any time, but it was not impossible. However, Noah did not know how to take the world fragment from Lotus's heart without hurting her. Therefore, how could Noah not feel troubled? Lotus did not know if she had noticed Noah's dilemma, but she suddenly spoke. To be honest, I'm not at all interested in the thing in my body that can even change the will of the Dark Elf King and make the power of the Dark Elf King not choose to reincarnate into a male but into me, as well as the origin of you who possesses this inconceivable thing. Is that so? Noah was slightly startled, and then he smiled bitterly. It's something that fundamentally changed your fate. You really don't mind? If I say that I don't mind, then I must be lying. Lotus was silent for a while and then said this sentence. Otherwise, I wouldn't come to you. You to say. Noah looked up at the elven forest outside Alicia Elven Academy and asked. When did you notice it? Noah was naturally asking when Lotus had detected the existence of the world fragment. Noah was more or less surprised by Lotus's answer. From the very beginning, ever since I gained consciousness, I felt its existence as if it was in the unseen world. In the beginning? Noah was really surprised. One must know that even Orpheus could not detect the existence of the world fragment in his body. He could only passively endure the influence of the world fragment, which was why he came to find Noah. Lotus, on the other hand, actually knew about the existence of the world fragment from the beginning. However, thinking about it carefully, it was not that strange. Although Lotus was not as strong as Orpheus, the existence of the world fragment came in all kinds of forms. Some could not be seen except for Noah. Some could be seen and touched by anyone. It was not strange that Lotus could detect it. Then, have you never thought of figuring out what it is? Noah asked doubtfully. Anyone would feel uneasy if there was an unknown thing residing in their body, right? That's true, but so far, it has not brought me any adverse effects. Lotus said lightly as if she was not talking about her own affairs. Although I inherited the power of the Dark Elf King because of its existence, similarly, without it, not only would the power of the Dark Elf King not be able to perfectly awaken, but it might also devour me and turn me into a resentful spirit like the demon King Solomon. That might be the case. Then. Noah was silent for a moment, then sighed. You have never thought of taking it out? Indeed, I have never thought of it. Lotus's tone did not have any confusion. Of course, there is also Lastia's firm opposition. That child thinks that I can perfectly awaken and control the power of the Dark Elf King because of the inexplicable existence in my body. If I take it out, the power of the Dark Elf King is likely to go berserk. So, you really don't care about anything? Noah frowned. Even if you know that I want to take it back, you don't care? I don't care. Lotus's tone still did not have any confusion, and similarly, there was no falsehood in it. However, this time around, Lotus turned around and looked straight at Noah. She spoke with great determination. Whether it is the origin of the thing in my body, whether it is related to you, the influence of the power of the Dark Elf King, or what will happen to me if I take it out, I don't care about any of these. I just feel that since my fate has changed because of this, then I should fight you for it. That's all. Hearing this, Noah finally understood Lotus's thoughts. This girl kept saying that her fate had changed because of the world fragment, but in fact, she did not want her fate to be decided by other things. Since the beginning of this life of Liena Subbles was not decided by himself, then the end of this life should be decided by himself. This was the reason why Lotus did not care about the world fragment, but was somewhat obsessed with Noah. In short, Lotus's true purpose was not to investigate the origin of the world fragment, nor to contact Noah. She also did not want to investigate the relationship between Noah and the world fragment. She only wanted to prove her own will through Noah, who had an extraordinary relationship with the world fragment that had changed her fate. That's right. Like Versilia, Lotus only wanted to prove herself. To prove that even if the beginning and process of her life had been changed by an unknown existence, it did not mean that this girl did not have her own will. I can clearly feel that something in my body is desperately wanting to return to your side, Lotus said as she stared at Noah, emphasizing each and every word. However, since it has taken the liberty of lodging in my body and changed my life and fate, then, if it wants to leave, it must first ask for my permission. From Lotus's words, Noah could hear an unprecedentedly strong will. It was not a willpower that existed to make things difficult for Noah, nor was it a willpower that existed to get to the bottom of things, nor was it a willpower that existed to complain. It was simply a willpower that existed to prove its own willpower. So, if you want to take it back, then defeat me. Lotus turned around and once again faced the vast scenery of the academy, her voice slowly reverberating in the surroundings. Defeat me, and no matter how you want to take it back, I will cooperate. Leaving these words behind, Lotus leaped and fell into the thicket below. Her figure gradually disappeared from there. In the end, Lotus only left one sentence for Noah. I will be waiting for you at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah lowered his eyes and looked in the direction that Lotus disappeared in, not saying anything for a long time. Because, other than Lotus's words, there was another girl who left a message for Noah. For Lotus's sake, I will not let her lose to you. As soon as the voice fell, a pitch-black feather slowly floated down from the horizon. Noah reached out his hand and caught the pitch-black feather. He stared at the pitch-black feather for a long time before helplessly speaking. It seems that the troubles I have to deal with in this world will not end so easily. Chapter 10:19. Master. Please wake up. Master. In his sleep, Noah heard a very pleasant but emotionless immature voice calling him. However, perhaps it was because the voice was too cute and pleasing to the ear, Noah didn't wake up at all. Instead, he felt like he had heard a nice lullaby, and his consciousness became more immersed in the dream. Soon, he fell asleep. Master. Please wake up. There was a hint of confusion in the melodious voice that was calling Noah. It seemed that she didn't know what to do about Noah not waking up. She didn't say anything. Although Noah subconsciously felt that it was a pity that the melodious voice was gone, he was more immersed in the comfortable quilt without the voice. At this moment, a sweet breath hit Noah's face. Chirp. The next moment, Noah only felt a very soft feeling on his lips. Vaguely, Noah could even feel the touch of a small lip. That touch, for Noah, was familiar. In a daze, Noah identified the body that he was touching. His drowsy head instantly sobered up, and even his eyes opened abruptly. As soon as he opened his eyes, a beautiful scenery was imprinted in Noah's eyes. You finally woke up, Master. Her entire body was naked, her creamy white and smooth skin was directly exposed to the air. Only a pair of ivory-like slender thighs covered with pitch-black knee-high socks was riding on Noah's body. She lowered her head and stared at Noah expressionlessly. A tender and white body. Slender and long limbs. Bright and dazzling silver hair. A young and beautiful face. Who else could it be except for Aster? AI. Aster? The first thing he saw when he woke up in the morning was such an exciting scene. As a healthy man, Noah's whole body almost trembled and he almost screamed. Why? Why is it you again? Because I'm calling Master to wake up. Aster's beautiful face still didn't show the slightest emotion as she said this sentence as if it was a matter of course. The contract spirit of the person who gives snacks also seems to wake her master up in the morning, so Aster also tried. The so-called person who gives snacks in Aster's mouth was Lindsay Lay. As a young miss who was good at household chores, Linley's favorite thing to do in her free time was to develop new desserts, and then let Carol and Fenrir taste them. Occasionally, she would even take them to the academy to share, claiming that this was the consideration a noble should have. Since living in Lindsay Lay's room, Aster seemed to be often fed by Lindsay Lay. Thus, as time passed, Aster began to call Linley the person who gave out snacks. In other words, Aster saw Lindsay Lay's contract spirit Fenrir wake her master up in the morning, so she decided to follow suit. However, Fenrir actually wouldn't take the initiative to wake Lindsay Lay up in the morning. Only when Lindsay Lay specifically told Fenrir to wake her up in the morning before she went to bed, Fenrir would do it. Thinking of this, Noah turned his gaze to the bed at the side. There, Lindsay Lay's figure had already disappeared. It was probably like what Aster said, she was woken up by Fenrir. Only Carol, this incompetent maid, was still lying in bed, snoring loudly, looking very happy. Okay, I understand the reason. Noah said somewhat weakly. But even if you want to wake me up, you should at least wear some clothes, right? I think this attire can make you happy. Aster said faintly. As Master's contract spirit, pleasing you, I think it's a matter of course. He didn't know if it was Noah's misconception. Noah felt that Aster seemed to have emphasized on the words, contract spirit. Moreover, although Aster was usually expressionless, the expression on her face today seemed to be more indifferent than before, giving people a feeling that she was distant and even unreasonable. Noticing this, Noah hesitated for a moment and said with some uncertainty. I say, Aster, are you angry? When these words came out, Aster's mysterious eyes turned slightly and stared straight at Noah. I am Master's contract spirit, and also Master's sword. Not long ago, we made a vow to each other, saying that we will never leave each other. Noah laughed dryly. Indeed. Indeed, I still remember, but... Aster put a slender finger on Noah's lips, looking straight at Noah with a trace of dissatisfaction. Master, you used a weapon other than Aster's. Hearing Aster's words, Noah finally understood why Aster was suddenly angry. Not long ago, when he was fighting against Vivian, Noah had activated the Gate of Babylon. With thousands of noble artifacts, he instantly destroyed thousands of fire wolf spirits controlled by Vivian using the blood of the Elf King sealed with the Elf King's blood. For the people of this world, even if he explained the origin of the noble artifacts to them, they probably wouldn't understand. The only thing that was certain was that none of the 1,000 noble artifacts were weaker than the elf device of this world. Aster also didn't know what a noble artifact was. Therefore, from Aster's point of view, it was as if Noah had used another elf device, which made her feel very uncomfortable. In other words, Aster was jealous. Moreover, she was jealous of Noah's weapon. I am Master's sword, and also the strongest sword spirit. Aster stared at Noah and said seriously. You have me who once annihilated the infernal king. Master doesn't need those third-rate weapons. Hearing this, Noah's expression became resentful. When he was fighting against Vivian, although Noah did not use a high-grade noble artifact, it was still a noble artifact. As a legendary artifact that the hero spirits possessed when they were alive, and after the hero spirits were upgraded to the hero spirit seat, it became the trump card of the hero spirits. Even if it was the lowest grade, E-grade noble artifact, its power was much stronger than many of the skills of humans. However, in Aster's eyes, such an existence was merely a third-rate weapon. It was estimated that only the strongest sword spirit, whose strength was comparable to an A++ grade noble artifact, could say that. After all, even if Noah had all the noble artifacts that could exist in the form of weapons and tools in this world, there were only a handful of noble artifacts that could be compared to Aster's. Considering the increase in power that could be obtained when working with Aster, other than the strongest series of noble artifacts, there was really no other noble artifact that could surpass Aster's full power. However, Noah could not help but laugh at Aster's dissatisfaction. Listen carefully, Aster. Noah extended his hand and patted Aster's head. You're different from those weapons. Different? Aster was puzzled. What's different about me? Although those weapons are powerful, to me, they're still just weapons. Noah patted Aster's head and said softly. But Aster is different. To me, apart from being my sword, Aster is also a rare companion. You have to remember this in your heart, do you understand? Hearing this, Aster stared blankly at Noah's gentle expression. His eyes that were filled with displeasure gradually returned to normal. I understand, Master. Oh. Noah was a little suspicious. Then tell me, what do you understand? Those weapons that Master has are just normal weapons to you, but I'm special. Aster said. So, from today onwards, not only will I be Master's sword, but I will also be Master's beloved sword. Seeing Aster's serious expression, Noah could only feel speechless in his heart. Since Aster woke him up, Noah did not plan to continue sleeping. After tidying up his clothes and letting Aster change, Noah held Aster's hand and walked out of the room. Humph, humph, humph. As soon as they came out of the room, a pleasant humming sound immediately entered Noah's ears. Chapter 10:20. Humph humph. In the kitchen, Linley, wearing an apron, was happily humming a song while making breakfast. The sweet aroma from the kitchen filled the entire dormitory room. Smelling the aroma in the air, not to mention Noah, even Aster looked towards the kitchen. Her beautiful big eyes were blinking, and one could see some desire in them. Linley, who was making breakfast in the kitchen, seemed to have noticed the arrival of Noah and Aster. She turned her head and looked outside the kitchen. When she saw Noah and Aster, an elegant smile appeared on her delicate face. "Good morning." "Good morning." Noah nodded. He lowered his gaze slightly and looked at the breakfast Linley was making. "Making breakfast?" "Yes." Linley seemed to be in a good mood. She skillfully made breakfast while happily replying to him. "Where's Carol? Hasn't she woken up yet?" "No." Noah shrugged. "That incompetent maid is still snoring away." "Don't talk about Carol like that." Linley glared at Noah and said reproachfully. "The maids of the Lawrence Frost family only need to be cute. If that's the case, you might as well buy a doll." Noah sighed. "Do you need me to wake her up?" "There's no need." Linley proudly raised the breakfast she was preparing. "Although Carol will continue to sleep if no one wakes her up, she will still be hungry. Once she smells the aroma, that child will wake up." "Sounds like a pet from somewhere." Noah laughed dryly. "It seems that I need to reevaluate the young miss and maid of the Lawrence Frost family. It's good that you know." Linley didn't seem to hear the derogatory meaning in Noah's words, and her mood became happy again. "Since you're awake, I'll make breakfast for you." Noah didn't argue and directly nodded. He held Aster's hand, who was looking towards the kitchen, and sat down at the dining table. "Humph humph, humph, humph." Linley seemed to be very satisfied with the fact that someone was looking forward to the breakfast she made. Her mood also became better. Not only did she make breakfast a little faster, but her technique also became more flexible. "She really doesn't look like a spoiled young lady." Looking at Linley, who was happily busy in the kitchen, Noah couldn't help smiling. Linley's ability to take care of the family was truly off the charts. Even Alice, who specialized in cooking, couldn't win against Linley in terms of culinary skills. Every time he thought of the inconceivable situation of the young girl and her servant living in this room, Noah would sigh. Linley and Carol must have made a mistake somewhere. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that Linley, as a young lady, could be said to be omnipotent in family matters, while Carol, as a maid, was even more useless than the spoiled young lady. Just as Noah was thinking this and paying attention to Linley, who was busy in the kitchen, Linley, wearing an apron, carried a small tray full of breakfast, turned around with a smile and walked out. On the tray, there were sandwich-like pieces on the surface, drizzled with honey, roasted to incomparable crispness, and emitting an appetizing aroma. The delicious-looking breakfast laid on the tray and was placed one by Linley on the table. "Here, please." As soon as he smelled the aroma, Noah's stomach had already begun to protest. Therefore, under Linley's beckoning, Noah reached out and picked up a sandwich, taking a small bite. The sweetness that stimulated the taste buds immediately spread in Noah's mouth. Although Noah didn't like sweet things, he didn't dislike it either. Therefore, Noah praised without any hesitation. "It's quite delicious." "Is it?" Linley, wearing an apron, said with some happiness and some pride. "This is made with cream and honey, a specialty of the Lawrencester territory. The taste is definitely much better than ordinary sandwiches." Saying such a sentence, Linley also brought out a tea set from the kitchen. "If you're done eating, come and taste the black tea I made myself. This is also made with the tea leaves of the Lawrencester territory." Hearing this, even Noah had a feeling that the service was too considerate, so he couldn't help but say so. "Linley will definitely be a good bride in the future." "Huh?" Linley was startled at first, then her pretty face blushed, and she said shyly with a mosquito voice. This is a proposal?" Noah didn't hear Linley's whisper and could only ask in confusion. "Did you say anything?" "No. Nothing." Linley shook her head in a panic, and poured out a cup of hot black tea with a red face. You can enjoy it. Oh. Although Noah was a little puzzled by Linciliai's reaction, he didn't probe further and continued to eat the delicious sandwich in his hand. At this time, Noah realized that his clothes were being pulled by a small hand. Master, Alice looked directly at Noah, her eyes that were usually full of mystery were surging with some desire. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but smile, and tore a small piece of the sandwich in his hand and fed it to Aster. Come, Aster. Aster immediately opened his mouth obediently and bit the sandwich that Noah fed him. He puffed up his cheeks and chewed cutely. Linciliai, who saw this, let out a small cry of surprise. Noah looked at Linciliai with a puzzled face. What's wrong? No. Linciliai's gaze secretly peeked at the sandwich in Noah's hand until she was sure that the sandwich that Noah had just tore off to feed Aster was bitten by himself. Isn't this an indirect kiss? This time, Noah still couldn't hear Linciliai's muttering. At that moment, Noah scratched his cheek and said with a wry smile. What? Do you want me to feed you too? Linciliai's pretty face instantly turned red, but she coughed and pretended to be calm. If you insist on doing this, it's not like I can't consider it. Although she said this, Linciliai's eyes also showed some desire. Noah could only sigh again, and tore off a small piece of the sandwich, and fed it to Linciliai somewhat unhappily. Then open your mouth. Don't order me around. Linciliai shouted, but there wasn't a trace of displeasure on her face. Instead, she looked somewhat happy. This girl, could it be that she's the kind of person who looks like an S, but is actually AM? Just as Noah was thinking this maliciously, the door was directly pushed open. Noah, Linciliai, you still haven't gotten up? The one who appeared at the door was Claire. Hurry up and get up, today we're going to announce the new team for the team. Claire's aggressive words became softer and softer towards the end. The reason was naturally because she saw Noah feeding Linciliai. What are you doing? The next moment, Claire's angry voice resounded in the Crow class dormitory, opening the first scene of this day's school life. Walking in the hallway of the Elven Academy, Noah, Claire, Linciliai, and Fianna walked in the direction of the announcement board. Is it a team competition? Fianna seemed to be a little nervous. This is the first time I'm participating in this kind of competition between elves. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? Fianna used to be a witch from the gods' parliament. The skills she learned were almost all ritualistic music and communication skills with elves. She didn't have any knowledge of sword dancing at all. It was natural for her to feel nervous. Don't worry, you're the most important support member in our team. Noah smiled slightly. You just need to dance the ritualistic music, leave the rest to us. You can't be more reliable when you say this, someone who can rival the strongest sword dancer. Fianna also smiled slightly. However, Fianna's smile was more or less somewhat complicated. Then, Fianna lowered her voice and said to Noah, don't worry about it. Undoubtedly, I'm just using you. Chapter 10:21. Undoubtedly, I'm just using you. When Noah heard this, his footsteps paused slightly, and then he returned to his original state as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Fianna was surprised. You don't care what I mean? Isn't it obvious? Noah smiled indifferently. That's right, you're just using me. Fianna was a bit speechless, but she still looked at Noah and said. You already knew? Or rather, your goal was clear from the start, right? Noah looked at Claire and Linley who were quarreling and said to Fianna without turning his head. As soon as you transferred here, you asked Gray and Vaz to find me and asked to join my team without hesitation. From this point on, I believe that everyone knows that you came here specifically for me, right? So it's still too obvious? Fianna smiled helplessly, but still nodded. But you're right. The reason I came to Alicia Elven Academy was because I heard about you. About me? Noah curled his lips. It should be about me and Lotus, right? That's not wrong. Fianna sighed. In the beginning, I didn't want to transfer to Alicia Elven Academy. I only decided to come to this academy after I received the report that you had a sword dance duel with Lotus and tied with her. I also heard that you have the same sword dance technique as Lotus. Let me guess why you made this decision. Noah suddenly continued Fianna's words. If you can be on the same team as the strongest sword dancer, then you have a high chance of achieving victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. That's why you transferred to Alicia Elven Academy and asked me to join right from the start, right? Fianna was silent. Then, let me guess why you're willing to go to this extent to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah said in a flat tone. I heard from Lotus that there were some problems with your contracted spirit. If I'm not wrong, that's why you want to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, right? This time, Fianna was completely speechless. Obviously, Noah had guessed correctly. Or rather, after knowing that there were problems with Fianna's contracted spirit, Noah had already guessed most of Fianna's situation. Noah felt that the reason why Fianna didn't choose to inherit Rubia Elstien's position 4 years ago and become the Fire Elf concubine must be because there was a problem with the contract with the elf. As everyone knew, the Elven concubine was at the peak of all the witches in the world and directly served the Elven king. Such an existence was like the messengers of God who spread the will of God to the world. One could imagine how high their status was. However, it was also because of this that the Elven concubine could only be the most outstanding of all the witches. If an Elven concubine who stood at the peak of all the witches had problems with her contracted spirit, it could only prove that her ability wasn't enough to become the Elven concubine. It could even cause the Elven king to dislike her and cause unnecessary trouble. Because of this, Fianna gave up the position of the Elven concubine. Others thought that Fianna had abandoned herself and failed to live up to the expectations of the Ordesian Empire's people, so she voluntarily gave up the position of the Elven concubine. Who knew that Fianna didn't voluntarily give up the position of the Elven concubine, but had no choice but to give up the position that was at the peak of all the witches? Perhaps the Ordesian Empire's royal family found out about Fianna's problem, so they banned her and made her disappear from everyone's sight, making her become the lost Elven concubine. Noah could also imagine how Fianna was looked down upon and neglected by the Ordesian Empire's royal family after losing the possibility of becoming the Elven concubine. However, Fianna didn't choose to sit still. Her Highness' plan was to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival to solve the problem of contracting spirits. This was the reason why Fianna didn't hesitate to give up her status as a princess and come to Alicia Elven Academy as an Elven envoy. However, there is one thing that I don't understand. Noah suddenly changed the topic. Because of Lotus, the problem of your contracted spirit has been solved. Why do you still want to stay here? Do you think that I can return to the House of Gods and compete for the position of the Elven concubine after taking back the power of the contracted spirit? Fianna bitterly smiled. You think too much of the Gods' Parliament. It's a place that has gradually decayed over time. In the past, the Gods' Parliament only wanted to nurture the most outstanding Elven concubines for the Elven king, but now, the Gods' Parliament has been bound by many worldly things. A place like that wouldn't allow a stain to appear on its reputation. Fianna sarcastically said. For example, a person who once gave up the position of the Elven concubine and became a lost Elven concubine can still stay there. Even so, you have no reason to stay in my team, right? Noah glanced at Fianna. Even if you can't return to the House of Gods, you are still the excellent witch concubine who almost became the Elven concubine. If the royal family of Alicia Empire knows that the problem of your contracted spirit has been solved, then you can take back everything you have as a princess, right? But I don't want to do that. Fianna said without any hesitation. When I lost my status and power, those guys looked at me with contempt and mockery. Now that I have recovered, I am showing off in front of those guys. It feels like I am performing like a clown. I hate that feeling. Besides, it's not like I don't have any reason to stay. Fianna looked at Noah with a sweet smile. Her gloomy tone was swept away. In the elf forest, in order to solve the problem of contracting elves, Lotus and I had a lot of contact. I can feel that the strongest sword dancer seems to pay special attention to you. I want to know what is the relationship between you two. Hearing this, Noah was startled and said with uncertainty. Don't tell me you want to stay in my team because of this? Not only that. Fianna smiled mischievously. I just feel that since I have no place to go, I might as well follow you temporarily and go to the same stage as the strongest sword dancer. That's not bad. After saying this, Fianna put her hands behind her back and swung her waist-length hair. She hummed and walked forward as if her mood had suddenly improved. Seeing Fianna gradually catch up with Claire and Linley, Noah smiled helplessly. This girl definitely has the potential to become a witch. While talking, the group arrived at the announcement board. Found it. The sharp-eyed Claire immediately found an announcement. Tomorrow's team competition, Fairy's Tale vs. Winged Dragon Team. Winged Dragon Team? Noah turned his gaze back to the ranking board and found the Winged Dragon Team's ranking. Isn't that the team that replaced Versilia after she left and became the number 1 team on the leaderboard? That's right. Linley frowned. The 5 members are all the most outstanding students in the senior grade. They are a rare strong opponent. That's right. Fianna spread her hands. But we will win, right? Claire and Linley looked at each other, smiled, and said in unison. That's for sure. Seeing this scene, Noah couldn't help but smile. At this moment, the students on the side began to whisper. I didn't expect that not only would Lady Versilia's number 1 position be replaced, but even the 3rd place Wind King Knight Regiment's team might be replaced. That can't be helped. Because Lady Versilia attacked the Wind King Knight Regiment before, many of the knights were injured, including the Knight Regiment's teammates. Since their teammates are injured, they can only give up the competition and give up the ranking. What a pity. Noah, Claire, Linley, and Fianna looked at each other. Chapter 1022. Alessia Elven Academy, Mole Class Dormitory, a pink room. What should I do? On the sofa, Alice, who was wearing pajamas, was hugging her legs as she sat alone on the bed. Her face was filled with distress. Logically speaking, at this time, Alice would have been preparing to head to the headquarters of the Wind King Knights to attend their meeting. However, due to Versilia's unbridled attacks in the Wind King Knights, more than 80% of the Wind King Knights were injured and had yet to recover to the extent of being able to participate in the work of the Wind King Knights. Under such circumstances, Grey Vass personally ordered that the Wind King Knights' work would be temporarily suspended for the time being. The work of maintaining law and order would be carried out by the teachers of the Academy and the Empire's Elven Knights stationed in the Academy City until the Wind King Knights recovered their strength. Only then would they return to their posts. Therefore, Alice had a rare holiday and didn't need to rush to attend the meeting of the Wind King Knights. She also didn't need to continue the work of the Wind King Knights. She only needed to do her duty as a student. It was also because of this that Alice didn't wear her uniform and instead wore pajamas with dots printed on them. Her long sky blue hair wasn't tied up and was scattered behind her back, making her look more delicate. And today, Alice indeed lacked the seriousness and sternness that she usually had. Only distress filled Alice's heart. Undoubtedly, I've already promised Big Sister Versilia to obtain the qualifications to attend the Elven Sword Dance Festival. I didn't expect such trouble to appear. That day, Versilia was poaching people from the Wind King Knights, but because of Alice and the others questioning, she launched an attack on Alice's group. In the end, because of Noah's defense, Versilia's attack didn't affect Claire, Linsley, and Alice's group. However, the members of the Wind King Knights were all affected. Almost all of them suffered quite a bit of injuries. After all, Versilia's attack was targeted at Claire, Linsley, and Alice's group. As for Claire, Linley, and Alice, they were ranked at the top of the entire Alessia Elven Academy and could be said to be the cream of the crop. As a result, Versilia's attacks were naturally more powerful, causing the Elven envoys who were much weaker than Claire, Linley, and Alice to suffer heavy injuries. Now, more than 80% of them were still lying in the hospital. Among them were Alice's teammates. There's still about a month left before the Fairy Sword Dance Festival, but they won't be able to recover from their injuries in this month. Alice was troubled by such a problem. What should we do? In fact, when Alice went to visit her teammates, they had already expressed that they wanted Alice to disband her team and join another team so that they could continue competing for the qualifications for the Sword Dance Festival. Although Alice was adamant against it, believing that she could not abandon her teammates just because they were injured, she was eventually convinced by her teammates. No matter what, Alice's teammates were the ones who were most regretful about not being able to participate in the Fairy Sword Dance Festival. However, Alice's teammates did not blame Alice's sister because of this, nor did they blame Alice. Instead, they allowed Alice to represent everyone in the team and achieve active results in the Fairy Sword Dance Festival. To this, Alice could only agree, full of gratitude. However, after agreeing, another problem appeared in front of Alice. Whose team should I join? Originally, if Alice had wanted to join a team, the others would have welcomed her with open arms. Firstly, although Alice's strength was not as strong as Versilia's, she was still one of the best in the Elven Academy. No one would reject such an outstanding warrior joining a team. Secondly, Alice's ranking points were not low either. If she joined a team, it would definitely increase the team's ranking by a lot. It was because of the possibility of being forced to disband a team or leave a team that the Elven Academy adopted the system of individual ranking points. The team's ranking was based on the total ranking points of all the Elven users in the team. This was to prevent outstanding Elven users from being unable to participate in the Fairy Sword Dance Festival because they did not have a team. Alice's team was able to squeeze into the top 3 in the rankings. As the leader of the team, it was obvious how high Alice's ranking points were. Unfortunately, at this time, it was difficult to find a team to join unless it was an Elven user with astonishing strength and ranking points like Versilia. There was only about a month left before the Fairy Sword Dance Festival was officially held. At this point in time, almost every team in the Alicia Elven Academy had gathered enough teammates and started to cultivate their teamwork. It was impossible for Alice to ruin the entire team's plan and training just because of one person. Even if there were, it would be a weak team that was not presentable because of Alice's ranking points. A team like that might not even be able to obtain the right to participate in the Sword Dance of the Fairies. It was even more unrealistic to form another team. Now, the only way is to find a team that is lacking in people and has some strength. In Alice's memory, there was a team like that. And it was a rather impressive one. That was because not only was there an expert in that team who could compete with the strongest sword dancer, there was also someone who almost became the sister of the Elven Maiden and the previous Elven Maiden. In that team, almost no one was weaker than Alice. Even the one who was not proficient in combat could provide unimaginable support. In Alice's opinion, a team like that would definitely qualify for the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In fact, the chances of them winning the festival were very high. But such a team was still lacking a person. Who would not be tempted? But Alice murmured uneasily. Will he let me join? Once, the leader of that team had invited Alice. But because Alice already had a team at that time, she had rejected it. Now, if she were to apply to join, it would give people the feeling that she was aiming for the other party's ranking and strength. Moreover, Alice's sister, Versilia, had also caused a lot of trouble for that team. That was why Alice was so hesitant. Actually, you don't have to hesitate at all. When such a voice sounded in Alice's ears, she was immediately shocked. She turned her head abruptly and looked towards the source of the voice. She saw that Noah, Claire, Linley, and Fayanna were all at the door of Alice's room. You all. Alice was stunned. I'm sorry. Noah shrugged. Because you didn't even respond after knocking on the door for so long, we could only ask the dormitory manager to open the door and let us in. Well. Claire tossed the key in her hand. Because you didn't respond no matter how we called you, we easily got the key. So. Sorry. Alice finally reacted. She stood up and said embarrassedly. I was just thinking about something. Thinking about something? Noah looked at Alice with a smile that did not seem like a smile. Thinking about which team you want to join, right? Claire, Linley, and Fayanna all had smiles on their faces. Obviously, they already knew about Alice's predicament. She did not know how to refute. In response, Noah only walked in front of Alice and looked straight at her. Alice, join my team. Alice was stunned. As you can see, our team is still short of one person. We also have a reason to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah suddenly smiled and extended his hand towards Alice. So, Alice, lend me your strength. Hearing that, Alice stared blankly at Noah's outstretched hand and did not react for a long time. After a while, Alice suddenly smiled and placed her hand on Noah's outstretched hand. She let out a strong and powerful voice. I'm very willing. Chapter 10:23. Pa. 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 A series of loud explosions reverberated throughout the entire space. It was the sound of colorful ribbons blooming in the air and sprinkling down small stickers filled with a celebratory atmosphere at the same time as the sound of the cannons being filled with colorful ribbons rang out. The one who made the noise was Carol, who was dressed in a maid's uniform. Carol was holding a large firecracker in her hand. She smiled and congratulated Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice at the table in front of her. Congratulations to the fairy tale team for successfully advancing to first place on the Academy's rankings. They're qualified to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Hearing Carol's cheerful congratulations, the entire fairy tale team, led by Noah, couldn't help but smile with joy on their faces. Lin Si-lei even brushed her waist-length hair and said proudly, "With me, obtaining the qualification to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival is a piece of cake." I knew it. Carol clapped excitedly as if she had been waiting for this sentence for a long time. As expected of the eldest miss. Hey, hey, hey. Claire hurriedly said. Don't make it sound like it's all thanks to you, okay? That's right. Alice agreed with a serious expression. Everyone in the team is indispensable. Everyone should have contributed to being able to advance to first place on the Academy's rankings. I know. Linley pouted and said with some dissatisfaction. But you guys only send me to support from the rear every time and never let me fight on the front lines. Otherwise, I would have had more opportunities to show off my gorgeous skills. Fight on the front lines? Fayanna was speechless. How can we let an archer fight on the front lines? Claire and Alice both nodded in agreement, making Linley even more depressed. However, what everyone said was right. Undoubtedly, Linley's elven equipment was a bow and arrow, but she wanted to go to the front lines to fight. That was no longer a question of whether she could, but a question of whether it was right. It was only natural that he would be ridiculed like this. Noah, who was sitting at the side, looked at the interaction between the four girls and smiled knowingly. This was the dining hall of the Alicia Elven Academy. At the dining table in front of everyone, all kinds of famous dishes from all over the Empire were served by the accomplished chefs of the Academy. The dishes almost filled the entire table, and all kinds of fragrances were wafting out from them. It made one feel like they were about to start eating. The Alicia Elven Academy was an academy in the Ordisia Empire that specialized in nurturing outstanding elves. Not only were there teachers who were as powerful as the Empire's elven knights, but there was also Gray and Vaz, who were known as the strongest elven user on the continent, in charge of the dean's job. In addition, the contestants for the Elven Sword Dance Festival were all chosen from here. It was not hard to imagine how high their status was. Therefore, not only was the Academy's dining hall said to be able to prepare dishes from all over the Empire, but the taste was high and the scale was large. It was not inferior to the best restaurants in the imperial capital. Of course, with such a high level, the price was naturally not cheap. At the very least, for Claire, whose territory and property had been confiscated, and Fayanna, who had abandoned the title of Princess of the Ordisia Empire, they couldn't afford to eat in this dining hall. Even Alice and Linley wouldn't spend so much on food if they didn't have anything to do. However, today, the fairy tale, led by Noah, officially squeezed into the first place of the Academy rankings. In order to celebrate this matter, Noah proposed to hold a celebratory banquet here. As for the cost, it would naturally be Noah's responsibility to pay for it. After all, for Noah, who had the Gate of Babylon, money was no longer an issue. Even if Noah didn't have the habit of being extravagant and wasteful because of the Gate of Babylon, when it was time to be extravagant and enjoy, Noah wouldn't be a miser and hide everything. Placing a hand on his heart, Noah murmured. It's already been a month. In Noah's heart, the authority of the 10 incarnations represented the authority of the 10 incarnations. The outline of the stone plate connected to the 10 images was shining and heating like the sun. It was like a ferocious beast that had been locked in a cage for a long time and was about to break out. This phenomenon also told Noah that he had been in this world for a full month. As long as he stayed in this world for a full month, the world would adapt to Noah's powerful strength, allowing Noah to use that authority that could even annihilate gods without restraint. Only at this time could Noah be considered to be in his best state. We only used less than a month to squeeze into the first place of the Academy rankings. Noah suddenly smiled. In the Academy, there must be a lot of people who are dissatisfied with us as a dark horse, right? Noah's team had gathered all kinds of talents. Claire, Linley, and Alice were all outstanding elven users who could freely use elven devices when they were still in the lower grades. Even the majority of the upper grade students were ashamed of their inferiority. Although Fayanna didn't have any accomplishments in battle, with the help of her outstanding ritual music, besides the elf maiden who stood at the peak of the witch maiden, almost no one could surpass her. In addition, Noah had the same sword dance skills as the strongest sword dancer. His strength was already recognized as the strongest elven user in the Elven Academy. In fact, for a fairy tale to be able to get first place, it should be deserved. It was just that the members of this team made people unable to sincerely admire them. The sister of the elf maiden of calamity, Claire Elstian. The lost elf maiden, Fayanna Reo Deja. The problem child of the Crow class, Linley Lorenfrost. The leader of the Night Order, who originally had a good character, but because of the matter of Versilia, as the adopted elder sister, using the incantation engraving, she had recently become the subject of much discussion in private, Alice Farangelto. In addition, Noah was the only male elven user. With so many problematic characters gathered, it was impossible for fairy tale to not attract criticism. In fact, there were indeed many people who were secretly slandering fairy tale, holding a skeptical attitude towards their results. Don't worry about those guys. Claire, who was already used to seeing the ugly faces of others, curled her lips. Those guys are just jealous. They weren't very popular in the first place. If they take something that others can't get, it will naturally make some people feel bad. Fayanna also looked as if she had gotten over it. This kind of thing is common even in the palace, not to mention in this young Miss Academy that doesn't know how to hide anything. Really, sometimes I feel ashamed for them. Linley said listlessly. As nobles, can't they be more open-minded? Don't say that. On the contrary, it was Alice who spoke up for the students of the Academy and glanced at Noah. There are people who support us. Claire, Linley, and Fayanna also glanced at Noah. Seeing this, Noah could only say, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. You're talking about the children who sent me love letters because I have the same sword dance skill as Lotus, right? Lotus is the idol of all elven users. Fayanna said with a hidden meaning. And they were all attracted by Lotus's sword dance. In other words, during this period of time, Noah's posture when using the sword dance had also captured the hearts of many pure witches. In addition, Noah was a male, so it was natural that he received the admiration of many witches. However, Noah himself didn't think so. Those girls, they're just treating me as Lotus's substitute, right? Just as he finished speaking, a voice rang out. That's not necessarily true. Chapter 1024. That's not necessarily true. It was only when this voice rang out that everyone seemed to have been startled awake. They turned their heads and looked to the side. At the entrance of the restaurant, a cold beauty with long silver-gray hair was slowly walking in the direction of Noah's group. While walking, she said such a sentence. Perhaps there are some people who admire you because you have the same sword dance technique as Lotus, but there are also people who are captivated by your sword dance from the bottom of their hearts. Don't lump them together. Hearing this, Noah reacted and spoke in surprise. Grey Vase? Dean? Claire, Lindsley, Viviana, and Alice reacted and hurriedly stood up to salute. You don't have to be so reserved. Grey Vase waved her hand. I just came to find this little guy for something. Don't call me little guy. Noah frowned. You're looking for me? Don't tell me there's something troublesome. Oh. I think it's a good thing for men. Grey Vase smiled flirtatiously. After all, any man would be happy if a woman came to him voluntarily, right? Hearing Grey Vase's flirtatious words, the expressions of the young ladies stiffened. Then, their gazes shifted to Noah. You have that kind of relationship with the Dean? Not pure. You actually attacked the hero of the Empire, you shameless bastard. Claire, Lindsley, Viviana, and Alice all glared at Noah. What are you thinking? Noah couldn't help but shout. Do I look like the kind of guy who would attack an old woman who's almost 40 years old? Sure enough, old people will still be disliked by men. Grey Vase smiled happily. But don't worry, I don't mean to take this guy away. I just have something to give him. Things? The group of girls looked at each other. Things? Noah looked at Grey and Vase in confusion. Under the gazes of the group, the smile on Grey Vase's face slowly disappeared and was replaced by an unprecedented seriousness. It's inconvenient here. Let's go to the elf forest. Seeing the serious expression on Grey's face, Noah thought for a while and nodded. I understand. After saying that, Noah stood up and said to the group of girls. Sorry, I'll be leaving first. Enjoy your meal, I'll come back to pay you later. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls seemed to realize from Grey Vase's serious expression how important the thing she was going to give Noah was, so they didn't object. Don't worry about it. When we get back to the room, I'll bring you some delicious food. Perhaps it's a trick to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Since it's an order from the Dean, we have to treat it seriously. Hearing the comments of the girls, Noah shook his head with a smile. Then, I'll be leaving first. Oh, right, Grace suddenly said. Where's your sword spirit? He's resting, Noah said in confusion. What's wrong? Wake her up, Grey Vase said in an unquestionable tone. We'll need her later. Noah frowned slightly. Do I need to use a contract spirit? I hope it's not a bad thing. Under the lead of Grey and Vase, Noah walked out of the gate of Alicia Elf Academy and entered the elf forest. On the side, Aster, who was holding Noah's hand, was yawning cutely. Even though she still had an expressionless face, she seemed to be more listless than usual. Actually, with Aster's strength, she shouldn't be so tired dealing with a bunch of brats in the academy. However, Noah and Aster had formed a contract for less than a month, and their tacit understanding was still getting used to each other. Therefore, usually, when he was free, Noah would let Aster transform into the demon slayer to practice the compatibility and running in of the godly might energy in an attempt to draw out more of Aster's power. Only by mastering Aster could Noah unleash the strength of the strongest sword spirit that had once single-handedly annihilated the Demon King and the 72 pillar spirits under his command. To be able to possess the highest level of curse resistance, and to be able to brand an elven mark on Noah's body that possessed the same level of curse resistance, and to form a contract with Noah, Aster's strength was definitely not as simple as it was now. At least, in Noah's opinion, Aster was much stronger than many of the so-called highest-ranked spirits. After all, not only was Aster the strongest of the sword spirits, but it also had a curse that would eventually cause its owner to die. The spirits that formed a contract with it had to pay the price of their lives in exchange for Aster's strength. With such a huge price, the strength that could be obtained was naturally proportional. Therefore, in order to draw out more of Aster's strength, Noah and Aster still needed to practice and practice more. Under such a situation of continuous practice and practice, Aster would be so tired. Seeing Aster yawning continuously, even Noah felt a bit of heartache. He couldn't help but ask Gray and Vaz. "What do you want to give me? Why do I need to go to Aster? Don't be in such a hurry. Once we reach the destination, you'll naturally know." Gray and Vaz continued to walk forward without looking back. "Speaking of which, I haven't congratulated you for getting first place and obtaining the qualification to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival." "Then I really have to thank you," Noah said grumpily. "Although you don't look like you're happy for me at all." "Isn't that a given?" Gray and Vaz said matter-of-factly. "If you can't even get first place at this level, how can you win in the Elven Sword Dance Festival?" As they spoke, Gray and Vaz brought Noah to an empty space in the elven forest. Although it was called an empty space, there was actually a round boulder formation on the empty space. Looking at the boulder formation, Noah was startled. "Isn't that the gate to the elemental spirit world?" Noah said uncertainly. "Could it be that you want to bring me to the elemental spirit world?" "That's right." Gray and Vaz gave an accurate answer. "After all, it's a little dangerous here." After leaving this unsettling sentence, Gray and Vaz stepped into the boulder formation. "Okay, hurry up and come in." Noah's frown deepened, but he didn't object. He held Aster's hand and walked into the boulder formation. Clank. Perhaps Gray and Vaz were already prepared, but the boulder formation emitted a bright light and enveloped Noah and Gray. In the next moment, Noah, Aster, Gray and Vaz disappeared into thin air. It was still a forest. However, the trees in the forest were twisted and looked somewhat awkward. The hazy light filled the air and filled the entire forest with a sense of mystery. Standing on an open space in the forest of the elemental spirit world, Noah looked around and immediately set his eyes on Gray and Vaz. "Okay, we've arrived at the elemental spirit world. You should tell me your purpose, right? No matter how anxious you are, what belongs to you will still belong to you." Gray and Vaz turned around and faced Noah. "You've met Lotus, right?" "Oh." Noah raised his eyebrows. "You already knew?" "I've sensed the aura of that dark elf called Lestia many times in the academy. Since that dark elf is here, there's no reason why Lotus isn't here, right?" Gray and Vaz smiled. "I didn't expect your relationship to become so good." That Lestia even said that there was nothing to be afraid of with Gray and Vaz. In the end, didn't she find out? He really wanted to know what kind of expression that dark elf girl would have if she heard what Gray and Vaz said. "What's wrong?" Noah asked. "What you're going to give me, is it related to Lotus?" Gray and Vaz looked straight at Noah. "What I'm going to give you is the ultimate mystery of the ultimate sword skill." Chapter 10:25. The ultimate secret of the absolute sword skill? Gray and Vaz's words made Noah completely stunned. The ultimate secret of the absolute sword skill was the destructive sword skill used against large elves' ardent spiraling sword dance. Undoubtedly, Gray and Vaz had told Noah that when they were learning this move. The power of the ardent spiraling sword dance was indeed quite powerful. After all, even Versilia, who had over 100 rune engravings and was in a berserk state, had been cleanly defeated by this move. Wasn't this enough to show how powerful this sword dance was? Even from Noah's point of view, he could not find any fault with this move. To put it bluntly, the absolute sword skill had already reached the pinnacle in the aspect of skill. Noah believed that even Tony, who knew how to use the absolute sword skill, and Luohao, who was known as the absolute sword master of the Wuling, could only barely match him in the aspect of absolute sword skill. Although Tony's absolute sword skill seemed to be much more superior than the absolute sword skill, it was only superior in the aspect of absolute sword skill. Otherwise, Noah, who had not learned the absolute sword skill and only relied on his instincts and fighting skills to wield the sword, would not have been said by Tony to have a sword skill that could match him. As for Luo Hao, this absolute sword master had reached the pinnacle in the aspect of palm techniques. That palm technique called 12 Flying Phoenix Divine Palms had once caused Noah, who had used a divine skill that was far beyond his instincts and wildness, to almost die under the palm. One could imagine how terrifying Luo Hao's palm technique was. However, regardless of palm techniques, in terms of sword techniques, Luo Hao's sword skills were estimated to be at the same level as Tony. Then, after learning the absolute sword skill, Noah should have reached the same level as Tony and Luo Hao in terms of sword skills. In the end, could it be that the most powerful move of the absolute sword skill, the destructive sword skill called Ardent Spiraling Sword Dance, was not the ultimate secret of the absolute sword skill? What are you talking about? Noah frowned. Didn't I already learn the Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance? Indeed. That absolute destruction sword technique can be said to be the highest level of sword technique. As long as it is practiced to the peak, even the demon god tier elves will be no match for it. It is this sword technique that created the strongest sword dancer. Gray and Vei's eyes flashed. However, there is one last mystery above the blazing flower spiral sword dance, and I did not teach it to you. Noah stared at Gray and Vass. After confirming that Gray and Vass weren't joking, he spoke. Then why did you tell me that Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance is the profound meaning of the absolute sword skill? Because that sword technique will backfire on the user's body, Gray Vase said. You didn't notice, did you? The absolute sword skill actually has side effects. Side effects? Noah exclaimed. You said that the absolute sword skill has side effects? Isn't that natural? Gray Vase sighed. The content of the absolute sword skill is very diverse. It includes partial destruction, group annihilation, counter-specific attributes, weapon destruction, counterattack, sword killing, and so on. There are all kinds of strange things. Every move can only be used after the technique and divine might are used to the extreme. It will cause a huge burden to the body and harm the user. After saying that, Gravath looked at Noah with a meaningful gaze. Originally, when I taught you the absolute sword skill at the beginning, I was thinking of making you suffer a little, so I purposely didn't tell you the side effects of the absolute sword skill. However, after you successfully used the absolute sword skill, I was completely shocked. Your body didn't suffer any damage at all. This was the reason why Noah didn't notice the side effects of the absolute sword skill. From then on, I noticed it. Gray Vase stared at Noah. Your body is far tougher than ordinary people. It doesn't even belong to the category of human beings. Noah had the blessing of LV for ability value. Under the blessing of LV for durability, ability, Noah's body was naturally extremely tough. The burden on the body that he could bear was also quite high. It was because of this point that Noah wanted to get the ability called Grace. It allowed him to use 2 incarnations of authority at the same time, reduce the burden of using incarnations at the same time, and prolong the time of using incarnations at the same time. The burden of the absolute sword skill on the body, no matter how great it was, couldn't be greater than using 2 incarnations at the same time. As a result, that kind of burden was directly offset by Noah's LV for durability. The true mystery of the absolute sword skill is that it will cause a great burden on the body. So, I didn't even teach Lotus. I didn't want to teach it to you at the beginning, Gray Vase said. However, if your body is so tough that it can ignore the burden of the absolute sword skill, then you may be able to bear the burden of this mystery. After saying that, a phosphorescent divine power surged from Gray Vase's body. Since that's the case, I'll let you have this absolute sword skill's profound meaning that no one but me knows. After saying that, Gray Vase stretched out a hand and pointed to the ground. Come out from the gate of the underworld, the great Earl. Suddenly, under Gray Vase's body, a blood-red light lit up. As if someone was drawing a precise pattern on the ground, it gradually drew an ominous magic square. In the center of the magic array shining with a crimson brilliance, an irregular black mass began to surge out, like boiling black magma, rising into the air. In an instant, the entire forest was filled with a gloomy and oppressive feeling that gave people goosebumps. This gloomy and oppressive feeling directly awakened Aster from his nap. Aster raised his head, looked straight at the pitch-black mass, and said such a sentence. "Master, that is one of the 72 pillar spirits that was once controlled by the demon King Solomon." One of the 72 pillar spirits that was once controlled by the demon King Solomon? Noah raised his eyebrows. "I didn't expect that your contracted spirit was actually the spirit of the former demon king." "That kind of thing is fine." Grey Vase slowly stretched out her hand, and the pitch-black mass immediately turned into a sword and fell into Grey Vase's hand. Even if it was one of the 72 pillar spirits that was once controlled by the demon king, wasn't it still defeated by your demon slayer? Noah suddenly smiled and held Aster's hand tightly. "Cold Steel Queen, the demon slayer holy sword, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power." The highest spirit named Aster closed his eyes, and his entire body turned into light particles that gathered in Noah's hand, turning into a dazzling silver holy sword that illuminated the entire forest. "Remember, when you taught me the ardent spiraling sword dance, you only performed it once in front of me, and then let me directly defeat the demon god-level spirit that was sleeping in the elven forest to learn that move, right?" Noah pointed the demon slayer in his hand at Grey Vase. "Then, this time, what kind of teaching method are you going to use to make people want to cut you into pieces?" "Don't worry." Grey Vase smiled coldly at Noah. "This time, I will use a more obvious and easier to understand method to teach you." The moment she finished speaking, a mass of divine power suddenly condensed under Grey Vase's feet that were firmly planted on the ground. Feeling the divine power condensing under Grey Vase's feet, Noah's eyes almost subconsciously narrowed. Almost at the same time, the divine power condensed under Grey Vase's feet exploded, turning into a substantial impact force that directly became a powerful thrust, causing Grey Vase's body to suddenly burst out like a flash of lightning, flashing through space. Grey Vase raised the elven device in her hand and directly pierced towards Noah's direction. Grey Vase's sharp piercing even directly tore the air apart, bringing about a sharp sound of wind breaking incessantly. Using the divine power as a driving force, and then condensing all the strength in her body, she carried out a thunder-like piercing to destroy the sword skill. Ultimate sword skill. Initial form Purple Lightning. Chapter 1026. Absolute sword skill. Initial form, Purple Lightning. The lightning-like spike directly cut through the space. Along with Grey Vath's attack, it directly pierced towards Noah's direction. In response, Noah only took a slight step forward. His body strangely leaned to one side and dodged to the side. Chi! The spike carried a sharp sound as it pierced through the air. With a fierce wind, it brushed past Noah's chest and fiercely flew past him. "I knew that you would definitely use this move at the beginning." Casually dodging Grey Vath's absolute sword skill initial form, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Grey Vath, who was obviously stunned by this attack, and softly said, "But, unfortunately, I am also a user of this move. I will no longer be surprised by the speed of Purple Lightning." "Is that so?" Grey Vath's stunned expression only lasted for a moment. Immediately, her eyes became sharp. "Then, I don't need to show mercy, right?" After saying that, the surging phosphorescent divine power around Grey Vath directly gathered on the elven device in her hand, causing the pitch-black demon sword to suddenly move and brighten up. Absolute sword skill. Third form, Dance of the Moon Shadow. The slash that was like moonlight suddenly flourished. It rubbed against the air, and like a horizontal arc of light, it fiercely slashed towards Noah's direction. Looking at Grey Vath's sudden change in attack, Noah grasped the demon slayer in his hand. His body spun, and a burst of divine power poured into the silver holy sword at the same time, drawing an arc of light. Absolute sword skill. Third form, Dance of the Moon Shadow. The same absolute sword skill, two completely different slashes, but they both drew a perfect arc in space like moonlight. In the end, they heavily collided with each other. Clang! The holy sword and demon sword collided, causing a crisp sound of collision that reverberated in the air. Noah's hand that was holding the demon slayer suddenly exerted force. Divine power poured into the holy sword continuously, causing the holy sword to emit a bright white light. Bang! With a low muffled sound, in a burst of sparks, the two slashes that were like moonlight heavily bounced off. Noah was still standing in the same place, his body didn't move an inch. Grey Vath directly rubbed against the ground. Her feet fiercely rubbed against the ground for a distance of more than 10 meters before she stabilized herself. Seeing that Grey Vath was repelled by his absolute sword skill, Noah's 5 fingers that were holding the demon slayer slightly bent, then clenched again and again, causing the divine power in his body to surge into the holy sword like waves of order. During this period of time, Noah had been practicing and coordinating with Aster almost every day, causing Noah to become more and more familiar with the fluctuations of Aster's divine power. Now, with the infusion of divine power that was filled with order, although Noah and Aster's divine power couldn't be said to be perfectly compatible, it was still like water that blended together, causing the light on the demon slayer to become brighter and brighter. Under such circumstances, the power of the holy sword that had once killed a demon king was constantly being drawn out. At that moment, Noah slightly raised his eyes. Soon after, his entire body mysteriously disappeared from the spot. Grey Vath, who had just stabilized herself, suddenly narrowed her cold eyes. Almost without thinking, she quickly retreated. However, just as Grey Vath's figure was about to retreat, a figure quietly appeared behind her like a ghost. In the next moment, the demon slayer that was mixed with powerful divine power and bright white light brought along a whistling wind. In just a flash, it ruthlessly slashed towards Grey Vath's back. Grey Vath almost reflexively turned her body forcefully. With the tip of her foot as the axis, the elven device in her hand drew an arc of light and slashed towards her own back. Clank! This time, the collision of the holy sword and the demon's sword gave off a bell-like sound, and intense sparks burst out. However, when the holy sword and demonic sword clashed, the silver demon slayer's radiance and divine aura directly suppressed Grey Vath's elven equipment, causing a gust of wind to surge out in all directions. Gotcha! Not long after, Grey Vath's elven device, the pitch-black demon sword, made such a sound when it collided with the holy sword. That was the sound of Grey Vath's elven device cracking. Even if it was Grey Vath, this scene caused her expression to change abruptly. After all, Grey Vath's elven device was without a doubt the highest-grade elven device. Not only was it one of the 72 elves under the command of Demon King Solomon, but it was also one of the highest-grade elves. How could such a magical equipment formed by such a fairy crack? This was something that had never happened in Grey Vath's life. It's a pity that my Aster is the strongest sword elf. Even the 72 elves under the command of Demon King Solomon were defeated by her. Noah smiled coldly at Grey Vath. Isn't this what you said just now? After saying that, Noah suddenly leaped and took a step back. Clank! In the next instant, a lightning-like silver sword light suddenly flashed and stabbed toward Grey Vath. Ultimate sword technique. Primary form, purple lightning. At this moment, Noah was only 2 to 3 steps away from Grey Vath. Using the lightning-like purple lightning at such a close distance, even Grey Vath couldn't dodge it. Therefore, that thunder-like attack directly cut through the air and heavily landed on Grey Vath's abdomen. Bang! With a muffled sound, Grey Vath's body flew out like a kite with a broken string. In the end, she suddenly turned around in midair and landed on the ground. After staggering a few times, she finally stabilized herself. If it was in the real world, this sword could seriously injure Grey Vath. However, in the elemental elven world, elven users could transform their elves into pure divine energy and turn the damage into a mental attack. It was because of this that Grey Vath could continue to stand up. It really hurts. Grey Vath's silver-gray eyes stared at Noah, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a joyful smile. It's been a long time since I felt the pain of being hit by someone else's elven device. It reminds me of the time when I fought hard in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. So, is the foreplay enough? Noah glanced at Grey Vath. Is it time to start? Grey Vath didn't answer. She only smiled sweetly and slowly raised the magic sword in her hand, pointing it at Noah. Then, open your eyes wide and watch carefully. After all, I can only use this once. Once? Noah was slightly startled. Come on. Grey Vath ignored Noah's startled expression and said. I know, that wasn't your full strength just now. Your strength should be even more terrifying. Use your full strength for the next attack, and then use your strongest sword skill to attack. Hearing this, Noah only looked at Grey Vath from afar and didn't say anything. Grey Vath fearlessly met Noah's gaze. In this regard, Noah nodded. I understand. He raised the holy sword in his hand and slowly infused his godly power into it. Noah looked straight at Grey Vath, and an astonishing aura surged from his body. Feeling Noah's aura, Grey Vath tightened her grip on the elven device, and the outline of her body began to emit a faint light. Whoosh! In the next second, Noah suddenly rushed forward like a gust of wind and rushed in front of Grey Vath in an instant. Whang! As if in response to Noah's next attack, the silver holy sword trembled and released the most dazzling light. Absolute sword skill. Formbreaker Ardent Spiraling Sword Dance 36 consecutive slashes. At this moment, the dazzling sword light bloomed like a lotus and turned into the most terrifying sword dance storm, enveloping Grey Vath in an overwhelming manner. For this attack, Noah used his full strength under the blessing of LV, for ability value. Facing this storm-like sword dance storm, Grey Vath just raised the elven device in her hand. Clang, 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 clang. In the fierce burst of sparks and violent ripples, Grey Vath seemed to have the help of God. She casually waved the elven device in her hand and received the storm-like slashes. Moreover, every time they collided, the godly power of Grey Vath's elven device was actually in sync with Noah's godly power and absorbed all of Noah's godly power. As a result, the full-strength sword dance that gathered Noah's LV, for ability value was comparable to Hercules' physical ability in the servant form. However, it was accompanied by countless sparks and shockwaves, and it was all bounced away. There was no time to be surprised. There was no time to react. When the last sword attack was blocked by Grey Vath, the power of the sword dance that gathered all the godly power that Noah could mobilize was now all condensed on Grey Vath's sword. Absolute sword skill. Ultimate sword skill, Sky Ultimate Flash. Like a flash of light, the sword pierced through Noah's chest. Chapter 10:27. Who? A whistling breeze blew through the elf forest, which seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The trees were all twisted, and the hazy fog that filled the air dissipated slightly. Even in the elemental elf world, there was still a difference between day and night. Right now, it was daytime. It could not be said to be dazzling, but rather warm sunlight shone down from the horizon. It shone on the middle of the empty ground, which had become much clearer due to the hazy fog being blown away by the breeze, causing the two figures on the empty ground to be revealed. Standing on the left was Grey Vath, who was holding a pitch-black magic sword. Due to absorbing Noah's massive divine power, Grey Vath's body was fluctuating with an extremely dense phosphorescent light. The aura on her body became more and more sluggish, announcing the end of this battle. Standing on the right, facing Grey Vath, Noah, who was holding a shining silver holy sword, was covering his chest with one hand. To be more precise, it should be said that he was covering his shoulder above his chest. His face was full of pain. This was something that couldn't be helped. After all, just 2 to 3 seconds ago, Grey Vath's elven device did indeed penetrate Noah's body, and it completely transformed into a mental attack, making Noah show a trace of pain. However, the profound meaning of the absolute sword skill Ultimate Heavenly Flash Dash, under the circumstances of landing a hit, should make it impossible for the opponent to continue fighting. But Noah was obviously only injured, and it wasn't to the extent that he couldn't continue fighting. In the end, you actually avoided the vital part of your heart, and my Sky Ultimate Flash only hit your shoulder, causing such a degree of damage? Grey Vath stared at Noah, who was covering his shoulder, and said in shock and amazement. You really aren't an ordinary person. That should be an absolute killing ultimate sword skill in theory. Hearing this, Noah only raised his face that was dripping with sweat. It was as if he was still recalling the dazzling sword strike just now. He fell into a deep silence. Sky Ultimate Flash. The ultimate sword skill of the highest level of the ultimate sword skill. This move was more or less beyond Noah's expectations. By matching the opponent's movements and breathing, you can see the flow of the opponent's divine power and sense the direction of the divine power, and then use your own divine power to synchronize with the opponent's divine power, absorbing the opponent's divine power that should be repelling each other and turning it into your own, Noah said to Grey Vath in shock and amazement. To be able to do this is no longer the ultimate sword skill of battle, right? At least, Noah had never heard of a sword skill that could absorb the opponent's divine power and make use of the opponent's divine power. In Noah's knowledge of this world, there was only one thing that could achieve this kind of thing that was similar to magic. You are right. The ultimate sword skill of the ultimate sword skill is not only the sword skill of battle, but also the ritual music. Grey Vath's forehead also began to drip with sweat. That's not just a simple counterattack technique. Instead, it's a sword dance that requires one to sense the flow of divine power from the opponent's attack in order to synchronize with the opponent's attack. It's a combination of combat sword dance and ritual music. Theoretically speaking, this technique is a sure kill technique for close combat. Using the ultimate sword skill of battle and the ritual music together, using the sword skill of battle to perform the ritual music effect, interfering with the opponent's divine power, and turning the sword skill of battle into the ritual music of battle to absorb the opponent's divine power. Combining the divine power of battle and the opponent's divine power, the divine power that had expanded to the limit would be released in one go, and unleash a sure kill attack. The ultimate sword skill of the ultimate sword skill named Sky Ultimate Flash was a counterattack skill developed to the extreme. As long as it could be used successfully, even if the opponent was stronger than the user would still be able to defeat them. This move was the profound meaning of completely overlapping the opponent's strength with one's own before counterattacking. Even if the opponent was stronger than the user of the ultimate sword skill, the opponent's power would be turned into food for the user of the ultimate sword skill. That was why Grey Vath said that in theory, this move was an absolute sure kill attack for close combat. The reason why Noah was able to avoid the critical part of his body at the critical moment was completely because of the development ability he obtained when he was promoted to LV4. Swordsman. It could strengthen the damage of sword skill and sword ability, and at the same time, it could weaken the power of the opponent's sword skill and sword ability to a certain extent. It was because of this development ability that Noah was able to slightly shift the position of the sure kill attack. Mixed with the domain of the ritual music, Noah covered his shoulder and felt the impact of the divine power from both himself and the opponent. His breathing began to become rapid. No wonder you can bounce off my sword attack, whose physical strength is far better than yours. If it was only Grey Vath's own strength, there was no way to bounce off Noah's full attack with the LV, for ability value. Grey Vath could easily bounce off Noah's sword dance with all his strength. The secret was the effect of the ritual music. No matter how much power Noah used in the attack, Grey Vath could absorb it with the ritual music effect of the Sky Ultimate Flash, and turn it into her own. Under such circumstances, when Noah's sword and Grey Vath's sword collided, the divine power and power on it were all absorbed. It was also because of this that after absorbing Noah's own divine might and strength, the Sky's extinction flash, that was released in one go even directly hit Noah. That was indeed a move of the weak to defeat the strong. Of course, this move could only be used in close combat. If Noah used power and Gate of Babylon, or even magic cannon, then this move would be broken. Grey Vath might have known that Noah had other stronger moves, so she let Noah use his full strength in the next attack, but it was the strongest sword attack. Otherwise, this move wouldn't be able to be used. Sometimes, I'm really surprised by your ability. Feeling the intense pain on his shoulder, Noah stared at Grey Vath. The potential of the unique sword skill that you created is really shockingly great. Among other things, the initial form of purple lightning used the same principle as Noah's leap. The sixth form of shattered tooth was also the same as Noah's annihilation strike. It was an extension of the same principle and developed into a sword skill. Just from this point, one could see the potential of the absolute sword skill. And the breaking point of the absolute sword skill was the ardent spiral sword dance. When he first saw this move, Noah had a feeling. This move had almost the same principle as the swallow return of the assassin named Sasaki Kojiro in the Holy Grail War. Sasaki Kojiro's swallow return could ignore the concept of time and space, surpassing the elements of speed, delicacy, and feints. It was a multidimensional phenomenon. Although there were limitations, it was still a terrifying sword skill that reached part of the magical domain. Although the breaking point of the ardent spiral sword dance was not that terrifying, it was the same as swallow return. It pursued a short period of time to carry out a combo and cut off all the opponent's escape routes. If Noah could persevere in training, it was not impossible to make the ardent spiral sword dance and swallow return be the same as swallow return. It could disregard space and time, and it could be carried out almost at the same time. At that time, it was easy to foresee just how terrifying the ardent flower spiraling sword dance would be. From this, one could see the terrifying potential of the absolute sword skill, and the superb talent of Gray and Vase. Not to mention, there was also the Sky Ultimate Flash, that was even better than ardent spiral sword dance. That kind of thing, it's fine no matter what. Gray and Vase's voice became weak for some reason. The key is, did you see through this move? I already understand the principle. Noah nodded. Next, you just need to practice and practice. Gray and Vase smiled slightly. Then, her whole body suddenly tilted and fell straight down. Noah's face completely changed. Chapter 10:28. About an hour later, Noah brought Grey Vath out of the elemental elf world and brought her back to the Academy's recuperation room. Looking at Grey Vath, who was lying on the bed with a pale face, Noah didn't say anything for a long time. In the elemental elf world, Grey Vath collapsed after using the sky extinguishing flash. At first, Noah thought that it was the sky extinguishing flash that caused Grey Vath to end up like this. After feeding her a bottle of recovery medicine, he immediately brought Grey Vath back. However, just now, according to the diagnosis, Grey Vath collapsed not only because of the huge burden of the sky extinguishing flash, but also because of another reason. The meridians in charge of the circulation of divine power are all broken. Noah looked at Grey Vath's pale face and said in a deep voice. Don't tell me that it's also because of the side effect of the sky extinguishing flash. Unlike Noah, who could directly extract divine power from the source of divine power, the elves in this world all had meridians in charge of the circulation of divine power. Now, the meridians in Grey Vath's body that were responsible for the circulation of divine power were broken inch by inch. If Noah didn't give Grey Vath a recovery medicine in time, Grey Vath would have died from such injuries. But even so, Grey Vath's meridians that were in charge of the circulation of divine power could no longer be repaired. In other words, from now on, Grey Vath would no longer be able to use divine power. And if she couldn't use divine power, it meant that she couldn't use contracted elves. In other words, the Twilight Witch, who was known as the strongest elven user in the continent, who won the Elven Sword Dance Festival and made a wish to the Elven King that she wouldn't grow old and die. She was able to retain the abilities of an elven user when she was almost 40 years old, and her power didn't decline with the passage of time. Finally, the legend came to an end. Grey and Vath would never be able to use elves again. The existence known as the strongest fairy envoy on the continent would no longer exist. Such a serious consequence, Noah did not believe that it was caused by the side effects of the Sky's End Flash at all. Although that move was very powerful, it wasn't to the point where one had to pay such a price to use it. Otherwise, Grey and Vath would never teach Noah such a dangerous sword skill. However, the sky's extinction flash might not be the cause of Grey Vath's injuries, but Grey Vath undoubtedly used the sky's extinction flash to completely draw out the cause of the injury. From the looks of Grey and Vath, it was clear that they already knew that if they used the sky's extinction flash, they would definitely end up like this. Therefore, Noah needed an explanation. It was an explanation that Grey and Vath had gone to such lengths just to teach Noah the sky's end flash. Otherwise, Noah's conscience might be tormented for the rest of his life. After all, Noah's relationship with Grey and Vath wasn't deep enough for them to go to such extent, right? If he didn't figure it out, Noah felt that he wouldn't even be able to sleep well. You don't have to blame yourself. The sky's extinction flash was just a catalyst. My body being like this was already destined. Grey and Vath, who were lying on the bed, didn't look at Noah. Instead, they turned their heads and looked out of the window. They said in a hoarse voice, "Even if I didn't use the sky's extinction flash, it was only a matter of time before my body became like this." Of course, Noah was clear about this matter. If it wasn't for the fact that Grey and Vath's body originally had such a huge hidden danger, after drinking Noah's recovery medicine, Grey and Vath's body should have immediately recovered. Now, their body had recovered, but Grey and Vath's meridians that controlled the flow and circulation of divine power couldn't be repaired. That could only be because Grey and Vath's body had such a hidden danger all along, causing the cause of the disease to accumulate for many years. When it erupted in one breath, even Noah's recovery medicine couldn't repair it in time. It was directly destroyed, and there was no possibility of recovery. But for Noah, that wasn't a problem that could be avoided. In the end, Grey and Vath wanted to teach the sky's extinction flash to Noah. That was why their meridians were severed. Thinking of this fact, Noah couldn't persuade himself no matter how hard he tried. Grey and Vath didn't know if they sensed Noah's heavy mood, but they sighed and said so. "You should already know that I made a wish to the Elf King so that I could temporarily not age and die. As an elf envoy, my power should have been exhausted long ago. Thinking about it this way, I'm already very lucky to still have the power of an elf envoy until now." Grey and Vath turned their heads and looked at Noah. "At this time, I was still able to teach that sword skill to you, and even teach the entire ultimate sword skill, so that it wouldn't be lost. That's already considered lucky. I believe that with your tenacious body and powerful strength, you can definitely unleash the power of the ultimate sword skill more effectively than me. What's the reason?" Noah was silent for a while, and asked. "There must be a reason for your body to be in such a terrible condition, right? It's okay to tell you." Grey and Vath weakly raised one hand and pressed on her heart. "There's a spell seal engraved on my heart." "Spell seal?" Noah was startled at first, then he exclaimed in shock. "You transplanted a spell seal on your heart?" Transplanted a spell seal on her heart. Recently, Noah had heard of a similar case. Versilia. This extremely conceited knight's life was almost ruined because of transplanting a spell seal on her heart. She even almost lost her life. Grey and Vath actually had a spell seal on their heart. If this matter was known by others, it would probably cause a huge uproar. The Twilight Witch, who was known as the strongest elf envoy on the continent, was actually so powerful because of a spell seal. This would definitely become a scandal. Don't think so much. Even if others know, it's not a shameful thing. Grey and Vath glanced at Noah. Don't forget, the ban on spell engraving was only issued after the Lambard War. The spell engraving in my heart was transplanted before that. Even if it's exposed, there won't be any problems. So. Noah frowned. You became like this because of the erosion of the spell seal over the years? That's right. Grey and Vath nodded. If it wasn't because of the wish granted by the Elf King that my body wouldn't be destroyed, my body wouldn't be able to hold on until today. That's not your problem. Noah suddenly fell silent. Lotus said that the erosion of the spell seal on her heart almost made Versilia lose her ability as an elf envoy. Thanks to Noah's recovery potion, she was saved. But Versilia hadn't been eroded by the spell seal for a long time. Unlike Gray and Vath, who had been eroded by the spell seal for decades, the side effects erupted all at once. Even Noah's recovery potion couldn't repair it, and it was completely destroyed. However, in Noah's treasury, there were no elixirs specially used to repair the meridians of elf envoys. After all, the treasures in Noah's treasury were all things from the Shape Moon world. And there were no elf envoys in the Shape Moon world. Naturally, there was no way to repair Gray and Vath's meridians. Why? Noah could only ask this question. Why did you go to such lengths to teach me the ultimate sky flash? This time, it was Gray and Vath's turn to be silent. After a while, Gray Vath sighed and said, "Let's talk about it later. If you want to know, I'll tell you when the Elven Sword Dance Festival is officially held." After saying this, Gray and Vath closed their eyes. Noah could only give up on asking. After coming out of the infirmary, Noah's brows were furrowed. I owe that witch a huge favor now. With that thought in mind, Noah returned to Linley's room in the dormitory of the Crow class with a heavy heart. He pushed the door open and walked in. "You're back." As soon as he opened the door, such a voice immediately sounded. Chapter 1029. Claire, Linsley, Viviana, and Alice were all present in Linsley's room. Even Carol was at Linsley's side. Together with the other girls, they all looked at Noah. "How is it?" Alice was the first to ask. "Has the matter with the dean been taken care of?" Noah pulled himself together as he recalled the Heaven's End flash, and the fundamental principle behind it. He nodded his head heavily. "I've received the thing that Gray and Vaz wanted to give me. Next, as long as he spent some time practicing and familiarizing himself with it, with Noah's sensitivity towards battle techniques, he should be able to quickly grasp it. And once he grasped the Skies and Flash, even if he didn't use Authority and Gate of Babylon, Noah would have a close combat technique that he could use in high-level battles." According to Gray and Vaz, even Lotus didn't know the secret behind this ultimate sword technique. Moreover, Gray and Vaz had lost their elven use ability and couldn't perform the sword dance. Apart from Noah, there was no one else who could grasp the Skies and Flash. Even though Noah knew that Gravath must have her own reasons for teaching him Heavenly Flash, even though she was willing to let her elven summoner abilities decline in advance, in order not to waste Gravath's efforts, Noah would try his best to master the secret of this ultimate sword technique as soon as possible. Not knowing why Gray and Vaz called Noah out to teach him a trump card, Viviana curiously asked. "What did the dean give you?" "Something beyond your imagination." Noah shook his head and gave such an answer. "Maybe you'll have a chance to see it." "Who knows?" Seeing that Noah didn't intend to continue talking, the group of girls also gave up on pursuing the matter. At this time, Alice suddenly spoke. "By the way, Noah, do we have any plans for our team?" "Plan?" Noah couldn't help but blink at the sudden question. "What do you mean?" "This is what our team plans to do next," Alice explained. "There is still a month before the official start of the Sword Dance Festival. At this time, in order to allow the participating teams to have sufficient rest, the Academy will begin to reduce the number of team matches held. Based on the current situation, even if we were arranged to participate in the group competition, it would probably only be 1 or 2 times, right?" Claire said in a relaxed tone. "Even if we don't participate in 1 or 2 of the group matches and forfeit, with our current ranking, we'll still sit firmly at the top of the rankings. We just went to the bulletin board to take a closer look and did some rough calculations. Our current ranking is almost half ahead of the second place Pterosaur team," Fianna said somewhat mischievously. "With such a difference in points, I believe that even if the second place Pterosaur team wants to kick us down again, it would be absolutely impossible if they don't complete at least 5 missions of the highest level before the official start of the Sword Dance Festival. In other words, it's basically impossible for our ranking to drop anymore. Even if we do, we definitely won't drop out of the top 3. Linley had a complacent look. "We've already obtained the qualification to participate in the Sword Dance Festival. There's no more suspense." I see. Noah understood. It was because they were clear about this that Gray and Vaz chose to impart the ultimate meaning of the absolute sword technique to Noah at this time. After all, Noah's team participating in the sword dance festival was something that was almost set in stone. Seeing Noah's expression of understanding, Alice finally spoke of her plan. Since there's no more suspense about us participating in the sword dance festival, then I think, for the next month, can we not participate in the team competition and just give up? Claire, Linley, and Fianna all nodded. Seeing this, Noah was a little surprised. No matter if it was Claire, Linley, Fianna, or Alice, they were all people who didn't want to admit defeat. Even if their participation in the sword dance festival was something that was set in stone, they wouldn't slack off because of this and just give up on the Academy's team competition, right? What was going on? Seeing Noah's confused expression, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all looked at each other. Actually, I was planning to take a leave of absence and go home, Alice said to Noah. To be able to represent the kingdom in the sword dance festival, I have to go home and report the good news to my father and grandfather. I'll have to meet my parents first, Linley said. As the eldest daughter of the Lorenfrost family, I have to fulfill my duty and report this good news to my family. Actually, it's the same for me. Fianna let out a big sigh and looked listless. Although I don't want to meet those fellows again, the royal family seems to have found out that I've solved the problem of contracting elves and will be attending the Elven Sword Dance Festival soon. I have to go back even if it's just for show. Is that so? Noah nodded in understanding. Not to mention Fianna, Alice, and the Lorenfrost family, and the Frangerdo family, were all famous families in the Empire. They had been loyal to the imperial family of the Empire for generations. Now, the children of the family could represent the Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and win glory for the Empire. If they could win, the entire Empire would be protected by the Elven King. It was impossible for them not to report such a big event to the family. As for Fianna, as the witch who had almost become an elven concubine, the princess who had been despised because of her contract with elves naturally had to deal with all kinds of problems after the news of her recovery reached the royal family. This was the so-called standpoint, right? What about you? Noah turned his gaze to Claire. Are you also going to take a leave of absence? Claire's family had already declined due to Rubia Elstian's betrayal. Not only had their territory and property been confiscated, even her parents had been thrown into prison. She was the only one who had obtained her freedom in the Elven Academy under the guarantee of Gray and Vass. In this situation, Claire shouldn't be able to return home to report the good news like Linley, Fianna, and Alice, right? Who would have thought that Claire would reveal a slightly joyful expression? No, I also plan to take a leave of absence. You also plan to take a leave of absence? Noah was curious. Where can you go? Because I obtained the right to participate in the Sword Dance Festival, I have already requested a prison visit from the kingdom. Claire said expectantly. Therefore, I also plan to take a leave of absence and go to the kingdom to meet with my parents. Betraying the Elven King was a big crime. Because of this, Claire didn't even have the qualifications to visit the prison in the capital. She hadn't seen her parents for a full 4 years. It wasn't easy for her to use the card of attending the Sword Dance Festival to request a prison visit from the kingdom, so Claire naturally wouldn't let it go. In other words, all 4 of you plan to take a leave of absence? Noah confirmed. For an entire month? Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all nodded in agreement. After all, it would take more than half a month to travel from here to the kingdom and back. My home is at the border, so it's even further. 1 month is barely enough. I also have to return to the kingdom. My home is also far away. Hearing the girl's words, Noah pondered for a moment and nodded. I understand. In that case, our team will unanimously give up on the team competition for the next month and directly rest until the Sword Dance Festival in a month. Yes. The girls were unable to contain their joy and agreed. Oh right, Claire seemed to have thought of something and said to Noah. Then, how do you plan to spend this month? Me? Noah glanced at the group of girls. After a while, he suddenly smiled. I also want to go home. Chapter 10:30. The next day, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice greeted Noah and left Alicia Elven Academy, heading to meet their parents. Noah, who was left behind, took the application documents and a basket of fruits to the infirmary of Alicia Elven Academy. He opened the door and walked in. Gray and Vaz were still lying on the bed yesterday, but their complexion wasn't as pale as yesterday. Instead, they had a ruddy complexion and looked as energetic as before. The recovery medicine that Noah had fed Gray and Vaz yesterday had started to take effect. Although it wasn't able to heal Gray and Vaz's meridians that had collapsed due to the erosion of the spell engravings for years, Noah's recovery medicine was still very effective in terms of her body. No one could tell that Gray and Vaz had lost their abilities as an elven user. At least, no one could tell from their appearance. Gray and Vaz seemed to have noticed Noah's arrival. They opened their eyes and looked in Noah's direction. Oh. Don't tell me you're here for treatment. It's best if you're just sick. Noah walked directly to Gray and Vaz's bed, placed the basket of fruits on the table, and looked around. Speaking of which, you're no longer the strongest elven user on the continent. Don't you need to assign yourself a guard? Gray and Vaz, who were known as the strongest elven user on the continent due to their active activities in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and Lambard's War, had made a lot of enemies for themselves. As a result, they had been assassinated for almost half of their lives and had developed terrifyingly sharp nerves. But now, Gray and Vaz were no longer the strongest elven user on the continent. Even though the sharp nerves had nothing to do with the ability of an elf user, others still couldn't do anything sneaky around Gray Vath. However, if an assassin wanted to kill Gray Vath, even if they were discovered, the success rate of the assassination was still very high. If that was the case, not assigning a guard to him was no different from courting death. Where do you think this is? Gray couldn't help but laugh. This is the Alicia Elven Academy. Not only are the Wind King Knights patrolling, but there are also teachers whose strength is comparable to the Empire's Elven Knights stationed here. Not just anyone can barge in. Do you think everyone can come and go as they please like you and Lotus? Besides, my body is almost fully recovered thanks to your medicine. From the outside, no one can tell that I've lost the ability to use elves. I can more or less intimidate some people. Grievous shrugged and looked up at Noah. Kid, I'll say it again. This isn't your fault. It's a fate that I had to face sooner or later. If you continue to blame yourself, it would be a little unreasonable. All right. Noah shook his head helplessly and handed the document in his hand to Gray Vath. I'm here to get permission to go out. Permission to go out? Gray Vath raised her eyebrows. Why? Do you want to go home and visit your family like those young ladies? Why? Noah asked. Can't I? It's not that you can't, but I'm very curious. Where can a kid like you go from who knows where? Gray Vath stood up and took the document in Noah's hand and signed her name without hesitation. You have a month of vacation. Remember to come back before the Elven Sword Dance Festival. I'm relying on you. Got it. Noah shrugged. Anyway, no matter how long he stayed in other worlds, when Noah returned to this world, only a month would have passed. So, it didn't matter. After coming out of the Academy's infirmary, Noah closed the door. Behind him, a burst of light particles suddenly floated out and condensed into a human figure. A beautiful silver-white waist-length hair hung freely by gravity, hanging on the soft and slender back. Aster opened a pair of mysterious eyes and looked at Noah. Master. Aster, are you awake? Noah was startled at first, then reacted and patted Aster's little head. How is it? Have you rested enough? Yes. Aster narrowed his eyes slightly, as though he was enjoying Noah's head patting. Even his voice had become soft and soft. I've rested enough. I can continue to practice with Master at any time. Is that so? Noah's hand movement paused slightly, and he squatted down. But, I'm sorry, Aster. Let's cancel our practice for now. Hearing this, Aster tilted his head suspiciously. What's wrong? No. Noah hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he chose to tell the truth. Actually, I plan to go home soon. Unlike Claire, Linley, Phaeana, and Alice, Noah's return home could only be realized in another world, and he had to pass through the world between, in the middle. And Gaia and Alea had both said that only Noah could enter the world gap. Even as representatives of the world's consciousness, they couldn't enter the world gap. In that case, Noah had no choice but to leave Aster here. However, Aster seemed to have seen through Noah's plan. The expression of enjoyment on his face disappeared, and he stared at Noah. Being stared at like this by Aster, Noah felt a bit unnatural. At this moment, Noah felt like he was abandoning a pet that stuck to him, and he loved it very much. His heart was full of contradictions. But, this was something that couldn't be helped. Although in this world, it seemed easy for the elven users to summon contracted spirits from the elemental world to their side, Noah didn't think that this kind of summoning could be carried out in two completely different worlds. From Noah's point of view, whether it was the human world or the elemental world, they could only be considered as different dimensions. They couldn't be considered as different worlds. After all, these two dimensions existed in a feather, so naturally, they could only be considered as one world. But to actually go through the worlds and perform a summoning, Noah didn't think it could be done. Just as Noah was about to coax Aster, Aster abruptly blurted out. Master, are you planning to go back to the so-called world gap and go to another world? This sentence made Noah, who wasn't mentally prepared at all, suck in a breath of cold air. Aster. Noah couldn't hide his surprise. Yes, I already know Master's situation. Aster said expressionlessly. Including the fact that Master came from another world and constantly traveled to various worlds to repair the broken worlds. Noah was extremely shocked. How did you know? Aster didn't answer, but asked back. Then, how did Master know about Aster? Hearing Aster's words, Noah suddenly came to a realization. Don't tell me, you also know about me through dreams? Yes. Aster nodded. The dreams between elven users and contracted spirits are shared. If Master can see my dreams, then I can naturally see Master's dreams too. Noah finally understood. Under such circumstances, Aster made such a request. Master, I hope to be with you. Noah was suddenly in a difficult position. But, Aster, since you know about me, then you should know that I have no way to bring you out of this world. Just as he finished his sentence, Aster actually shook his head. No, Master, you can bring me out of this world. Noah was stunned. I am Master's contracted spirit, and also Master's sword. Aster said. Although Master can't bring other people into the world gap, but you can bring weapons, items, and treasures. Moreover, you can bring them into other worlds. Then, if I transform into a spirit device, Master should be able to bring me along. This. Noah was suddenly moved. Thus, Noah pondered for a moment. After a while, he finally made a decision. Chapter 1031. Walala. Cold, bone-chilling rain poured down from the cloudy sky, forming a dense curtain of rain that enveloped the entire space of Magnolia. The air was filled with a kind of chill. Who would have thought that it would rain so heavily today? Undoubtedly, yesterday's weather was so good. Could it be that Julianne is in a bad mood again? That's why it's raining so heavily, right? Oi, don't talk nonsense. If Julianne hears it, our guild will be drowned in her tears. That's true. In the direction of Magnolia by the sea, in front of the entrance of the fairy tale guild that looked like a small castle, two middle-aged men of about 30 to 40 years of age were putting down the umbrellas in their hands while chatting. Although the strength of these two middle-aged men in fairy tale wasn't that outstanding, they were actually older members of the guild. The middle-aged man wearing a large coat was called Makeo. In the current fairy tale guild, there were many outstanding young magic shooters, and he was considered a senior figure. The middle-aged man with a jet hairstyle was called Wakaba. He was the same age as Makeo and had entered Fairy Tail at the same time. They were very good drinking buddies, but at the same time, they were also rivals. Long before Noah was adopted by Makarov, Makeo and Wakaba were already members of Fairy Tail. Thus, after Noah joined the guild, as senior figures, these two had taken care of Noah when he was young. It was worth mentioning that these two were both perverts. Undoubtedly, they had wives, but when they were not working, they would often woo the younger members of the guild. Thus, as the most popular cover girl and the most popular girl in the guild, Mira was often harassed by these two guys. In the end, he was naturally rejected by Mira with a gentle smile on her face without any hesitation or mercy. Incidentally, when Mira and Lisanna announced their engagement to Noah that night, Makeo and Wakaba got together to drink and cry for an entire night. Then, the next day, they continued to harass Mira. In short, although these two were of the older generation, they weren't serious people. However, no matter if it was Makeo or Wakaba, they were both very good people. Just as Makeo and Wakaba were chatting and preparing to enter the guild, suddenly, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from the other side of the rain, attracting their attention. In the pouring rain, a horse turned into a blurry shadow and galloped towards the Fairy Tail Guild at an extremely fast speed, splashing the ground with rainwater. Who is it? Riding a horse in such a heavy rain? It seems like it's coming for our guild. The two older members of the Fairy Tail Guild turned around in shock and looked over. Not long after, Makeo and Wakaba saw the familiar face of the person riding the horse. Noah. Makeo and Wakaba both stared blankly at the same time, but in the next second, they immediately cried out in surprise. Oh. Noah is back. The person who came was Noah. Riding a fine horse, Noah galloped along Magnolia's main road with ease until he saw that familiar building. His face was wet from the rain, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up into a smile. To the people of this world, Noah had only left for a month. But to Noah, since the last time he left this world, he had been wandering in other worlds for more than half a year. After more than half a year, Noah returned to the world of Fairy Tail. Almost immediately, he bought the fastest horse and rushed to Magnolia without stopping. As the guild building called Fairy Tail became bigger and bigger in his eyes, a familiar and comfortable feeling arose in Noah's heart. Although in other worlds, Noah had enjoyed all kinds of treatment with various identities, among which there was no lack of luxurious treatment compared to the royal family, but that was not Noah's home after all. It was only when he saw the guild building named Fairy Tail that Noah felt a strong sense of joy, as if he had returned home. Perhaps it was because Makeo and Wakaba's shouts were too loud, but in the Fairy Tail Guild, an uproar started to spread. Just as Noah was about to reach the entrance of the guild building, a group of people rushed out from inside the building and filled the entire area in front of the entrance. Big Brother Noah. With an extremely joyful voice, a slender figure squeezed to the front of the crowd. Seeing Noah galloping over on horseback, her face was full of joy. She raised her hand and waved at Noah while cheering. It was Lisanna. Beside Lisanna was Mira, who was wearing a princess dress. Although she did not express the same joy as Lisanna, but if one observed carefully, one would be able to see that Mira's signature gentle smile was much more intense than usual. Apart from Mira and Lisanna, Elusha, Lucy, Naz, Gray, Karna, Elfman, Lebby and the rest of the younger generation of Fairy Tail rushed out of the guild. Some of them waved at Noah, while others shouted at Noah. Seeing this, Noah's mood couldn't help but be somewhat excited, but the smile on his face immediately froze in the next moment. Noah. Along with a loud thump, Naz clenched his hand into a fist, which was burning with a scorching flame that could evaporate the rainwater. He fiercely rushed out, and with an extremely excited smile, he landed in the direction of Noah who was riding on horseback. Let's have a showdown. Seeing Naz, whose hand was burning with a scorching flame, leap out and charge towards him from mid-air, Noah narrowed his eyes and suddenly pulled the reins without hesitation. The galloping steed immediately reared up on its hind legs with a long neigh, its powerful front legs kicking out fiercely in the midst of the whistling sound of the wind. This kick landed right on Naz's abdomen, who was falling from midair. Bang! With a muffled sound, Naz was kicked away by a pair of powerful horse hooves. He flew back to the entrance of the Fairy Tale Guild at a speed faster than when he came. With Alusha, Lisanna, and Mira leading the group of Fairy Tale members cried out in alarm and hurriedly dodged to the side. Naz, who was sent flying like an arrow, heavily smashed into the wall beside the entrance. After a while, he slowly fell to the ground with his arms and legs spread out, his eyes rolling in circles. Naz. Habbi flew around Naz's head in a flurry. He looked like he was taking pleasure in Naz's misfortune. Are you dead yet? No. No. Naz groaned dizzily. You actually used a vehicle to defeat me. That's despicable, you really can't learn your lesson. Gray sneered. You know you can't win, but you still rushed up. How stupid. Well, that's also Naz's strength. Alusha smiled slightly, then said without changing her expression. Also, Gray, can you put on your clothes first? Woo-woo. Gray realized that he was only wearing a pair of shorts and cried out. Really? Lucy sighed sadly. Is there no normal person in this guild? Well. Lebby laughed dryly. Looking at the familiar scene, the smile on Noah's face returned to his face, and his mood surged. Finally, I'm home. Chapter 1032. Big Brother Noah. When Noah arrived at the entrance of Fairy Tale and dismounted from his horse, Lisanna didn't care that it was still raining outside. Braving the downpour, she threw herself at Noah. Noah immediately went up to her, opened his arms, and pulled her into his arms. Smelling the familiar scent of his fiancée in his arms, Noah couldn't help but greedily take in a deep breath of her fragrance. He then knocked on her head and scolded her. I'm already back, why did you still rush out? Can't you see that it's still raining outside? Big Brother Noah is the one who should be worried. It's raining so heavily and you didn't even take a carriage. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? Lisanna pinched Noah's waist, but she didn't leave Noah's embrace. Instead, she buried her head in Noah's chest and took a deep breath like Noah. It's Big Brother Noah sent. Hearing her almost inaudible mumbling, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he hugged her. In fact, Noah's surging emotions didn't diminish in the slightest because of this. Instead, they grew stronger. It was obvious that Noah was in a good mood. Even though it was raining heavily, the passion in his heart wasn't extinguished by the cold rain. You too. Within the entrance, Mira put her hands on her hips and said angrily. Don't stay out in the rain. If you don't come in, I'm going to get angry. The guild members also started to jeer. Hurry up and come in. It's fine if you come in and hug her, right? I know you two love each other, okay? Haha. Noah is also a man. To be able to hug his cute and beautiful fiancée, let alone the rain, even the snow is useless. Haha, ha 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 ha. The group of sorcerers from Fairy Tale burst out in laughter, making Noah and Lisanna feel embarrassed to continue hugging each other. You guys are really annoying. Lisanna let go of Noah in dissatisfaction, but she still insisted on holding onto Noah's hand. Even Noah shook his head with a chuckle. He held Lisanna's hand and slowly walked into the guild. Mira walked over helplessly. She raised her eyes and looked at Noah. Then, with a gentle smile, she extended her fair hand and wiped the rain off Noah's face without any disdain. Look at you, you're so drenched. Be careful not to catch a cold. How could it be that easy? Noah shrugged and reached out his hand, caressing Mira's cheek. I'm back, Mira. Yes. Mira smiled sweetly. Welcome back. Her words warmed Noah's heart. Seeing that Noah, Mira, and Lisanna were done being intimate, the rest of the group gathered around. You've been gone for a month, right? Alusha asked. How was it? Did you complete the mission? Back then, Noah had accepted a mission that would take a long time to complete. Using the excuse of going out on a mission, he spent a short 2 to 3 days to complete the mission before leaving the world of fairy tale. Hence, to the people of fairy tale, Noah had only gone on a long journey to complete a more complicated mission. I thought you would be able to complete the mission and come back faster. I didn't expect it to take you a month or so. Gray crossed his arms in front of him and looked at Noah. Could there have been some unforeseen circumstances? No matter which world it was, there was no lack of accidents. Sometimes, when sorcerers were carrying out a mission, they would suddenly encounter some unforeseen circumstances, causing the mission to become more complicated and difficult, causing the difficulty of the mission to increase. Everyone wondered if something similar had happened to Noah. Don't worry, there were no unforeseen circumstances. Noah scratched his cheek and said after hesitating for a moment. However, there was a bit of a chance encounter. Chance encounter? Everyone was curious. What? What? Naz seemed to have been resurrected on the spot, leaping up from the ground and squeezing his way over. Could it be that you met a dragon? I didn't meet a dragon. Noah suddenly smiled. But, I met an elf. An elf? Everyone was stunned. In front of everyone present, Noah pulled out a short sword from his back. It was an extremely gorgeous short sword that was silver in color. Aster. Noah said to the short sword in his hand. Come out and say hello to everyone. As soon as his voice fell, the short sword lying quietly in Noah's hand suddenly bloomed with a strong light. A group of sorcerers from fairy tale collectively exclaimed. In the midst of everyone's exclamations, in the strong light, the short sword lying in Noah's hand slowly began to disintegrate into a group of beautiful light particles. There was a fluctuation in the space, and it gathered together. Immediately, the dazzling light particles converged into a human figure. Looking at the petite girl gradually emerging in the dazzling light, everyone present was absent-minded. Buzz, the dazzling light slightly fluctuated in the vibration of the space. Like a pure fairy, the girl emerged in the dazzling light. Her eyes were tightly closed, and her soft silver-white hair swayed up and down. With a kind of sacred atmosphere, she gently landed on the ground. That scene was simply like an angel descending. Everyone present, big and small, male and female, old and young, fell into a state of absent-mindedness. For a moment, they were somewhat unable to react. Until Aster, like a chick that was awakened, pitifully trembled her eyelids and opened a pair of beautiful eyes filled with a mysterious feeling. The whole place suddenly became quiet. So cute. In the next second, a burst of earth-shattering shouts resounded throughout fairy tale. Rumble. This was the sound of a group of uncles with hearts in their eyes rushing towards Aster, causing the ground to tremble slightly. Don't even think about it. This was the sound of a group of girls bursting with maternal love, such as Alusha, Lisanna, Lucy, Karna, Lebby, and even Mira, when they saw a group of uncles rushing towards Aster's direction. Bang! This was the sound of a group of uncles being directly sent flying by a group of girls who had unknowingly grabbed a stick in their hands. Ah! This was the sound of a group of uncles being heavily hit by a stick, all of them flying backwards with blood spurting out of their noses. Following this, a burst of crackling sounds could be heard. This was the sound of a group of uncles flying backwards, smashing into tables and chairs, smashing them into pieces. Then, with Lucy, Karna, and Lebby taking the lead, the young girls of fairy tale all surrounded Aster, all of them shouting at the same time. What's your name? You're really cute. Hey, do you have anything you want to eat? We can give it to you. Aster seemed to be frightened by the unusual enthusiasm of the group of girls, her eyes filled with confusion as she looked towards Noah's direction. Seeing Aster's confused expression, Noah's face twitched. Even Noah didn't think that the people of the guild would have such a reaction. Hey, big brother Noah. Lisanna shook Noah's hand with a similarly excited expression. Who's that adorable child? Why did she come out of the sword? Noah didn't know what to say. Actually, after confirming Aster's thoughts and discovering that he could really bring Aster into this world, Noah had already thought of how to explain Aster's origins. However, after seeing the unexpected scene in front of him, Noah didn't know how to explain all of a sudden. Or rather, it didn't matter how he explained. After all, the people here weren't the kind of people who cared about the origins of others. As long as they could confirm that this person was a companion, then for the magic shooters of fairy tale, that was enough. Could it be that it wasn't? Chapter 1033. On the top floor of Fairy Tale, in a room, Noah was lying on the bed. Feeling the familiar warmth and touch of the blanket, he couldn't help but stretch. Sure enough, my own bed is still the most comfortable. Frankly speaking, the bed in Noah's room in Fairy Tale was not luxurious furniture. It was almost no different from a bed in an ordinary house. However, for some reason, Noah felt that his own bed was the most comfortable. Perhaps it was because after returning home, Noah felt a sense of belonging and peace of mind. That was why he felt that his own bed was the most comfortable. But who wouldn't feel the same way? Noah, who was lying on the bed, felt like he was about to fall asleep. However, after recalling what happened earlier, Noah pulled himself together. He straightened his body and raised the short sword in front of him. His expression was somewhat amused. Aster, don't hide anymore. There's no one else here. As soon as his voice fell, the short sword in Noah's hand trembled slightly and emitted a gentle white light. Shortly after, Aster slowly emerged from the gentle white light and fell into Noah's arms. Aster raised his head and silently looked at Noah. He didn't speak or move, which made Noah feel amused. Aster seemed to be unable to withstand the enthusiasm of his companions in Fairy Tale. In the end, after being surrounded and unable to escape, he transformed back into his short sword form and returned to Noah's side. Then, he refused to come out. If it wasn't for Aster's adorable appearance that caused him to be doted on by many people in the Elven Academy, Noah felt that Aster might have been traumatized by it. Now, under Aster's speechless gaze, Noah seemed to be able to see that Aster was protesting in his heart. He laughed and patted Aster's head. You were the one who said that you wanted to come back with me. With one sentence, Aster couldn't find a reason to complain. Seeing Aster's deflated expression, Noah couldn't help but laugh. This time, Aster wasn't willing. Master is so evil. Who said so? Noah pretended to be serious. I'm happy to see Aster being so popular. Liar. Aster was rarely so aggressive. Undoubtedly, Master didn't want to save me. That wasn't dangerous, so it's not called saving, right? Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When you were in Elven Academy, weren't you used to being loved by others? Being respected by humans is a good thing. Aster raised his eyebrows. However, the humans here don't seem to respect me at all. It's more like they treat me like a pet. Hearing this, Noah couldn't help but mutter in his heart. The students in Elven Academy also treat you as a pet. It's just that you didn't realize it. Of course, Noah wouldn't say it out loud. Instead, he continued to rub Aster's head with a gentle smile. Then, does Aster hate it? Aster muttered for a while and shook his head. Although I don't hate it, I don't like it either. Is that so? Noah asked again. Then, what does Aster think of Fairy Tale? Very noisy, Aster said, but he quickly changed the topic. But, it's also very warm. That's right. Noah's expression became even gentler. That's what I thought too. Seeing the gentle expression on Noah's face that couldn't be concealed, Aster looked at Noah and said, Master seems to be very happy. Oh. Noah raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Feeling. Aster continued to stare at Noah, to the point where he couldn't take his eyes off him. Master now has a different feeling compared to when he was in the academy. Feeling? Noah rubbed his nose. What kind of feeling is it? Aster didn't seem to know how to describe it. In the end, he could only say this sentence. There's a very relaxed feeling. Relax? Noah blinked his eyes and could only smile faintly. Maybe, after all, we're back home. Hearing Noah's words, Aster opened his small mouth as though he wanted to say something. However, he suddenly stopped and his body flashed with a ray of light. He transformed back into his dagger form and dropped onto the bed. Seeing this, Noah was startled at first, then he noticed it. Outside the door, there was a sound of footsteps slowly approaching. After a while, the door to Noah's room was opened. Outside the door, a white head came in and looked at Noah with a cute smile on her face. "Big brother Noah, I'm coming in." "Lysana?" Noah smiled helplessly. "Don't you have to work?" Like Mira, Lysana was no longer going out on missions as a sorcerer. Instead, she was working as a waitress in Fairy Tale. Occasionally, she would help Makarov with guild affairs and could be considered as the chairman's assistant. At this time, Lysana should be busy downstairs like Mira. It was because of this that Noah came up alone and didn't bring Mira and Lysana. Who knew that Lysana would still sneak up? "There's big sister Mira downstairs, it doesn't matter if I'm not here." Although she said this, Lysana felt like she was sneaking in. After sneaking in, she immediately closed the door. Without any hesitation, Lysana squeezed onto Noah's bed and hugged Noah's arm. She rested her head on Noah's shoulder, looking like she was in a good mood. Noah could smell a very pleasant scent from Lysana's body. After accompanying Noah in the rain for so long, it was impossible for Lysana not to take a shower. So, this smell should be the smell of shower gel or shampoo, right? What's wrong? Noah patted Lysana's head. "Do you need something from me?" "Ugh." The happy smile on Lysana's face turned into a sulky expression. "Can't I look for you if there's nothing?" "Looks like there really is nothing." Noah laughed. "Where's Grandpa? Why isn't he here?" "The chairman went out for a meeting," Lysana replied obediently. "I heard that it's a meeting that many large guilds have to attend." The chairman of the other guilds went, and so did the chairman. "A meeting." Noah sighed. "That's really unfortunate. The chairman said that he won't be gone for long," Lysana hurriedly said. "It shouldn't take long for them to return." "That's good." Noah's expression relaxed. "I was wondering why Grandpa wasn't in the guild. We were also wondering why Big Brother Noah would suddenly bring such a cute girl back." Lysana puffed up her cheeks. "That child is called Aster, right? The full name is a little complicated, so you can just call her Aster." Noah scratched his cheek. "Also, rather than saying that I brought her back, it's better to say that she came back with me, right? Is that so?" Lysana looked at Noah suspiciously. "I don't think it's that simple." "Well, I'll find a chance to tell you about my relationship with Aster in the future." Noah shrugged and reached out to pinch Lysana's little nose. "You're not jealous, are you?" "Of course not." Lysana wrinkled her nose and slapped Noah's hand away, looking at Noah with some resentment. "I just didn't think that Big Brother Noah would bring a girl back one day." "Then you're still saying that you're not jealous?" Noah patted her head lovingly. "That's jealous. I already said that I'm not." "Aya, don't mess up my hair," Lysana protested, opening her canine teeth and biting Noah's face. However, Noah advanced instead of retreating. When she bit him, he leaned forward and covered her lips with his. "Ugh," Lysana let out a muffled groan. She clenched her fist and knocked on Noah's chest. Then, she stretched out her hand and hugged Noah tightly, kissing and hugging him. Although she wasn't jealous, Lysana felt lonely. During the days when Noah wasn't in the guild. Chapter 1034. In the eyes of the people in Fairy Tale, although Noah was away for a month because of a mission, it was not as long as Kilda's. This guy who was known as the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale had been away for several years. Every time he left the guild and waited for Kilda's to come back, it would take him years to do so. And every time Kilda's left the guild, he would leave for such a long time. There were all kinds of reasons, but the most important reason was that this guy was not someone who could stay idle. He would often wander around the corners of the continent. This time, before Kildas left, he also accepted a mission. That was not an ordinary mission. It was not even an S-rank mission that only S-rank magic shooters could accept. It was necessary to mention it here. In fact, above S-rank missions, there were even higher-ranked missions, known as SS-rank missions. That was a dangerous mission that even S-rank magic shooters had to carefully consider their own abilities. And above SS-rank missions, there was a 10-year mission. Not a single magic shooter had been able to complete it in the past 10 years. Hence, it had become an extremely difficult task that had almost become a legendary task. Before Kildas left the guild, he accepted a mission. It was not an SS rank mission that was more difficult than S rank missions, nor was it more terrifying than SS rank missions. It was a 10-year mission that no one could complete in 10 years. Instead, it was a 100-year mission that no one could complete in 100 years. A mission that no magic shooters could complete in 100 years. One could imagine how difficult and dangerous that mission was. Of course, it was normal for him to spend 2 to 3 years on such a difficult mission. If he could complete that 100-year mission, perhaps Kildas would really become a legend in fairy tale. Compared to this, Noah, who had only been away for a month, was really nothing. Therefore, fairy tale was as noisy as usual, but no one came to disturb Noah. And so, Noah had a rare good sleep. He slept until the next day. Chirp. In his sleep, Noah suddenly felt his lips being sucked by a pair of even smaller lips. It was a wonderful feeling. Am I still kissing Lisanna? In his hazy state, Noah only had this question. It could not be helped. After all, Noah had spent so much time with Lisanna yesterday. After sending her out of the room, he immediately fell asleep. However, as his consciousness became clearer, Noah felt that something was wrong. No, Lisanna's lips are not so small, and it can't be Myra's lips. The touch of these lips, in his gradually awakening mind, Noah successfully found the memory of a girl who matched those small lips. At that moment, Noah shuddered and completely woke up. As soon as he opened his eyes, a young but extremely delicate face entered Noah's sight. Moreover, this face was not only less than 5 centimeters away from Noah, but also had its eyes closed. The small lips were tightly pressed against Noah's, continuously kissing him. At this moment, Noah could no longer remain calm. He hurriedly pushed away the immature but extremely delicate face in front of him. While breathing in the air that he did not know when he had started to lack, he cried out. Aster. That was Aster. He was completely naked, with only a pair of knee socks on his thighs. Aster was riding on Noah's waist. For some reason, he took the opportunity to kiss Noah when Noah was asleep. Master. Only then did Aster open his eyes. His face was expressionless as usual. However, because she had been kissing Noah all this while, Aster's eyes were swaying like rippling water. She looked quite alluring. If it was not because Aster's face was not blushing, Noah would probably be moved. Now, Noah only had a headache. Aster. Noah could not bear to look at him and covered his face. You're not wearing clothes again, it's not like that, master. Aster squeezed the thigh that was riding on Noah's waist. I'm wearing knee socks. Okay. Noah sighed. Then why did you take the opportunity to kiss me when I was sleeping? Because I wanted to wake Master up. Aster said as if it was a matter of fact. According to past experience, if I use this method, Master will immediately wake up. Can you please change wake up to wake up? Noah knocked his head and said as if he could not stand it anymore. In short, can you put on clothes first? Aster did not obediently listen to Noah's orders like before. Instead, he opened his big eyes and stared straight at Noah. Does Master hate my kisses? Hate? Noah was slightly startled. Why do you say that? Because every time I kiss Master, he doesn't seem to like it very much. Aster said to Noah. Isn't that hateful? It's not like that, Noah said helplessly. It's just that it's too sudden and I'm a bit scared. Aster stared at Noah without blinking. After a while, he spat out 2 words. Liar. Noah was startled and said strangely. Why do you say that? Because. Aster's eyes flashed. Yesterday, when Master kissed someone, undoubtedly, he was very happy. Noah was speechless. Noah definitely did not hate Aster's kisses. It was really because Aster did it so suddenly every time. Furthermore, he took advantage of Noah's sleeping state to ambush him. That was why Noah's reaction was so big. As for the kiss with Lysana and his fiancée, there was no reason for him to be unhappy, right? In the end, the contrast between the two made Aster feel dissatisfied. Does Master dislike my kisses that much? Aster asked as he moved his face closer to Noah. Is Master tired of playing with me? What do you mean tired of playing with you? Noah could not help but ask. Who taught you to say that? No one taught me. I saw it in the dessert seller's book. Linley, what kind of book do you usually read? Please don't change the topic. Aster moved his face closer to Noah, his eyes looking straight into Noah's eyes as he persistently asked. Why doesn't Master like my kisses? It's really not that I don't like it. Noah could only smile bitterly. It's just that it's too sudden, really. Is that so? Aster nodded. Soon after, he made such a request. Then, please kiss me now, Master. Noah's eyes widened slightly as he stood up in shock. At that moment, Noah saw a trace of indignation in Aster's eyes. That was Aster's indignation because he felt that Noah was treating him differently. It was obvious that Noah's reaction to the two's kisses was so different that she was throwing a rare tantrum. It was just like when Noah used a noble artifact and other weapons. Aster, who had always thought of herself as Noah's sword, was dissatisfied. Master, please close your eyes. Aster closed her eyes and pouted her lips as she moved closer to Noah's face. Seeing Aster's young and beautiful face getting closer and closer, and her delicate lips slowly moving closer, this time, Noah was really moved. Just as Noah and Aster were about to kiss, the door to the room opened. Big brother Noah. Time to get up. The voice that broke into the room not only gradually stiffened, but it also woke up Noah and Aster. On the other hand, Noah recognized the owner of the voice almost immediately. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he stiffly turned around to look at the door. Over there, Lysana maintained her posture of opening the door. She looked at Noah and Aster, who were clearly about to kiss. Her gaze swept over Aster's naked and tender body. Then, Lysana turned around and ran out, crying and yelling. Big brother Noah is a playboy. At that moment, Noah had the urge to die. Chapter 1035. Restless. This was what Noah was feeling right now. This was a feeling that Noah had not experienced in a long time. However, at this moment, if one had to describe Noah's state, it would be restless. This feeling was even more intense when Noah arrived at the fairy tale's first-floor hall. Stare dash. Almost immediately, everyone in the guild turned to look at Noah. This was not the first time that Noah had experienced the feeling of being the center of attention. He had even experienced more intense scenes than this. However, even so, Noah still felt extremely awkward. There was no other reason. Of the gazes that his companions in the guild cast toward Noah, some were filled with surprise, some were filled with confusion, some were filled with disbelief, some were filled with disbelief, some were filled with indignation, and some were filled with schadenfreude. Their gazes were filled with all sorts of emotions. Seeing this, Noah understood. Lysana's shout of "Brother Noah is a womanizer" was heard by everyone in the guild. In other words, the current situation was that everyone in the guild thought that Noah had cheated. It was that simple. Lysana was currently at the bar, talking to Mira about something. When she saw Noah come down, she immediately snorted and turned her head away. Thus, everyone in the guild turned to look at Noah even more intensely. Noah felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. This feeling was really unbearable. It was at this moment that Noah's group of companions came over and surrounded them. "You brat, don't tell me you really did something wrong to Mira and Lisanna?" The one who said this was Gray. In the whole of Fairy Tale, Noah and Gray's relationship could be said to be the most brotherly. It could not be helped. After all, the first person that Noah met after coming to Fairy Tale was Gray. Thus, compared to Lax's, Noah and Gray were more like brothers. It was also because of his understanding of Noah that Gray did not believe that Noah was that kind of person. It was not that Gray did not think that Noah would not get together with other girls outside. After all, in Fairy Tale, Noah already had 2 fiancées, didn't he? Gray did not believe that Noah would anger Lisanna because of other girls. Even if he got together with other girls outside, Noah would definitely not let Mira and Lisanna down. With this thought in mind, Gray asked such a question and said such a sentence. "I don't believe that you are that kind of person." "I don't believe it either," Naz shouted. "Although I don't know what's going on, Noah wouldn't do anything bad." On the contrary, Alusha showed a creepy smile to Noah. "Noah, marriage is a very beautiful thing. You are already engaged to Mira and Lisanna, so don't do anything to tarnish the sacred marriage." Seeing Alusha's smile, Noah felt a little scared. For some reason, Alusha seemed to be looking forward to marriage. When Noah was engaged to Mira and Lisanna, the Fairy Queen secretly looked at wedding magazines more than once. Therefore, for Alusha, marriage was a very sacred thing. Now, Noah seemed to be having an affair even though he was engaged to Lisanna. To Alusha, this was definitely an unforgivable thing. Although, this matter was very troublesome in itself. "Hey!" Even Lucy looked at Noah with suspicion. "Noah, did you really do something wrong to Lisanna?" "If you really did it, you better say it now," Lebby said angrily. "Otherwise, it's really too bad." "Well, even if it's Noah, he's still a man." Kana looked very carefree. "It's normal for men to be promiscuous. Or rather, he already has 2 fiancées. That's enough to prove how promiscuous Noah is, right?" This sentence was refuted by Elfman, who rushed over like a steel tower. Oh. Man. After knocking Naz and Gray away, Elfman rushed in front of Noah and grabbed Noah's shoulders with his palms as big as banana leaves. He glared at Noah and kept exerting force. "Even if you're a man, I can't forgive you for letting down my sister and Lisanna. Be a man." Pinch. Elfman kept exerting force as if he wanted to crush Noah's shoulders. If it wasn't for Noah's basic ability of durability, he would have been crushed into a metal pancake by this muscular man. Being surrounded and questioned by a group of friends who grew up with him, Noah really felt a lot of pressure. At that moment, Noah could only smile bitterly and open his mouth. Just as he was about to say something, a voice interrupted. "I say, don't interrogate Noah like this." Mira, who had appeared out of nowhere, separated the group of friends around Noah and patted away Elfman's hand that was gripping Noah's shoulders. She gently rubbed Noah's shoulders and said to everyone with a coquettish expression, "Noah hasn't even explained, and all of you look like you're condemning him. What if you scare Noah?" "No. This shouldn't scare him." Alusha and the others couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. "Sister?" Elfman asked carefully. "Aren't you angry? How can you be angry when you haven't figured out the situation yet?" Mira gently pushed everyone away. "Anyway, don't interrogate Noah like this. Go do your own things." Hearing that, Alusha and the others dispersed and went to do what they were supposed to do. The guild members who were watching a good show also returned to their noisy state and stopped paying attention to what was going on. Seeing this, Noah heaved a sigh of relief even though he didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. He then looked at Mira with an awkward expression. "All right, I'm not going to do anything wrong. Mira, don't worry, I'm not angry at you." Mira rubbed Noah's shoulders in amusement and gently tidied up Noah's clothes that were messed up by his little friends. She's not really angry at you. She's just blaming you for hiding something from her. Hiding your relationship with that kid called Aster. Is that so? Noah sighed. I'm not hiding anything. I told her last night that I'll find a chance to tell her about my relationship with Aster. So, she's not angry at you. Mira shook her head with a smile. If you really feel a little uneasy, then find a chance to coax Lisanna later. That child is very easy to coax. You should know that very well. All right. Noah could only nod helplessly. Then, I'll go back to work. You think about how to make her happy. Mira said. Then, she placed her hand on Noah's waist in a very natural manner. A smile that was gentler and more beautiful than ever appeared on her face. Also, remember to tell me what's going on after this. Looking at Mira's beautiful smile, Noah's heartbeat quickened as he complained inwardly. Sure enough, Mira was angry too. After Mira left, Noah rubbed his forehead and walked into the guild hall. At this time, the voices of the magic shooters in the guild entered Noah's ears. Recently, there seems to be an increase in crusade missions. And they're all missions related to the Dark Guild. Those guys are really unscrupulous. There's nothing we can do about it. Don't they know what time it is? Noah could clearly hear the conversation between the magic shooters of Fairy Tale around him. He stopped rubbing the space between his eyebrows and frowned instead. There are dark guilds active? This isn't good news. Chapter 1036. Due to the incident of the Paradise Tower, the original council had been disbanded under various public opinions. The new council was still in formation and couldn't operate for the time being. Therefore, since the dissolution of the council, many dark guilds and magic orders that could only operate in the dark began to stir. Not long ago, there were many dark guilds and magic orders that directly operated in the open, causing the magic shooters in the various guilds to rush between major cities for a period of time to crusade against those illegal dark guilds and magic orders. It had been more than 2 months since the incident at the Paradise Tower. For example, the dark guilds and magic orders, which lacked strength and foresight, had jumped out to abuse their power after the council was disbanded. By right, most of the large guilds should have been suppressed by the various large guilds. Noah heard that in the month he left, the activities of many dark guilds and magic orders had begun to calm down. Who would have thought that until now, there were still dark guilds that were active? That wasn't a good thing. After all, most of the weak dark guilds had already been wiped out. The dark guilds that could survive the encirclement of the various large guilds for more than 2 months definitely wouldn't be those clowns who didn't have any foresight and only knew how to jump out and make a scene. Now that the weak dark guilds had been suppressed, the big shots in the dark guilds would probably start to emerge, right? For example, one of the 3 most powerful dark guilds of the Baram Alliance that controlled the entire dark world, Grimoire Heart. It was the Guild of Hades, who had once threatened to destroy Fairy Tale. At this thought, Noah scanned his surroundings and fixed his gaze in a certain direction. There, Elusha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and Habe were sitting around a table. Noah walked over and stood behind Elusha. What are you talking about? Noah? Elusha turned her head and looked at Noah. Her expression seemed to vaguely reveal a hint of seriousness. We are talking about the recent Dark Guild Crusade mission. Sure enough, Elusha was the same as Noah. She realized that the active dark guilds weren't as simple as those dark guilds in the past. Recently, we've been accepting this type of mission, Gray, who had taken off all his clothes except for a pair of shorts, said to Noah with his legs crossed. However, the mission isn't going well. Noah sat down next to Elusha and asked Lucy, who was sitting on the other side, didn't go well? What? Did something happen? There isn't any trouble. It's just that the dark guilds have become more and more difficult to deal with recently. Lucy sighed deeply. Right now, the dark guilds are very cunning. Taking advantage of the fact that the new council has yet to be established, they started to become active. But once we, who have accepted the crusade mission, arrive at the mission location, they will immediately start to retreat. Several of our missions have nearly failed because of this. Love, Habby said as he sat at the dining table and gnawed on a fish. It's all Naz's fault. He was too excited and caused a huge commotion every time. The Dark Guilds received the news in advance. If it wasn't for Alusha chasing after him, our mission would have directly failed. Can you blame me for that? It's all because those guys are too cowardly. Naz grumbled in dissatisfaction. Since you want to fight, then come out and fight me fair and square. Why are you running? No, they are the Dark Guilds, Lucy couldn't help but ridicule. How is it possible for me to fight you fair and square? But, the crusade missions are getting more and more difficult. This is something that we have to admit, Alusha said solemnly. Our team is still all right. We can barely deal with those cunning Dark Guilds. But the other team's missions don't seem to be going so smoothly. And that's because our team has me, Naz, and Gray. Alusha is now definitely the most powerful female archmage in the entire fairy tale, other than Mira. Or rather, in the long period when Mira was no longer active as an archmage, Alusha's strength might have completely surpassed Myra's. At least, Noah's sensing ability told him that Alusha has grown a little in this month. It's probably because of the long-term crusade missions that she has tempered herself in actual combat and slaughter. With Alusha's current strength, it's not impossible for her to be chosen as one of the top 10 holy archmages. Adding on Naz and Gray, who are the strongest under the S-rank archmages, there's no problem in dealing with some petty tricks from the Dark Guilds. Thus, Lucy laughed out loud. Sure enough, you didn't include me? Well, Lucy, don't be sad. Hubby snickered. Who asked you to be so weak? It's not up to you to say that. You're weaker than me. Lucy was furious. And you weren't included. Hearing this, Hubby proudly puffed out his chest. Because I'm a cat. Hearing this, Lucy complained again. There's nothing to be proud of, right? Seeing Lucy and Hubby talking back and forth, leading the whole atmosphere to a happy scene, Noah couldn't help but smile, and then he became serious. I don't care about the other Dark Guilds. I'm more concerned about the 3 Dark Guilds of the Baram Alliance. Alusha and the others looked at each other, and their expressions suddenly became heavy. Baram Alliance. An alliance formed by the 3 most powerful Dark Guilds that control the entire continent. The strongest in this alliance, the Grimoire Heart, had recently abducted all the magic shooters of the fairy tale, almost causing the fairy tale to disintegrate. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something in the fairy tale that even Hades was afraid of, the fairy tale might have been destroyed by Hades at that time. And there are 2 other Dark Guilds that are on the same level as Grimoire Heart in the Baram Alliance. Thinking of this, I believe, anyone would feel heavy in their heart. At that time, Hades, who led Grimoire Heart, even came directly to Magnolia. Noah looked around at everyone. So, I'm worried. Did the other 2 Dark Guilds of the Baram Alliance also start to take action? No. No way. Lucy laughed dryly. So far, I haven't heard of any news of such Dark Guilds appearing. No, Noah's worry is not without reason. Alusha's face tensed up. Even the Grimoire Heart has brazenly come to Magnolia. It's not surprising that the other 2 Dark Guilds in the Balam Alliance would make a move. Not long ago, the guild leader went out for a meeting. That meeting was attended by the guild leaders of the major guilds. I think it's very likely to be a discussion about this matter. That's not necessarily the case. At that time, we'll probably have a difficult crusade mission to carry out, right? Gray narrowed his eyes. For example, dealing with the Dark Guilds of the Baram Alliance. That one sentence made the entire atmosphere at the scene turn solemn. No. No way. Lucy was in tears. A Grimoire Heart already caused such a big problem for our guild. Do we still have to deal with 2 Dark Guilds of the same level? I don't care about the Baram Alliance. Naz stood up and stepped on the table with one foot. His fist was burning with flames, and an excited smile hung on his face. It's best if they all come out together. Let me send them flying in one breath. However, an old voice sounded at this time, responding to Naz's words. It's impossible for all of them, but it's still possible for one of them. Chapter 1037. It's impossible to complete all of them, but it's still possible to complete one of them. When such an aged voice resounded and spread throughout the entire fairy tale, the originally noisy fairy tale instantly quieted down. Noah and the others all turned their gazes towards the source of the voice. From the direction of fairy tale's entrance, a short and old figure slowly walked in. Seeing the short and old figure, Elisha and the others stood up. President. Surprisingly, it was Makarov. Noah also stood up, looking at the short figure slowly walking in from outside the entrance. He couldn't help but call out. Grandpa, Noah. Makarov looked in Noah's direction and suddenly smiled. You're back. How's the mission? Yes, although it took some time, it was successfully completed. Noah suppressed the excitement in his heart and nodded. There were no accidents, don't worry. That's good. Makarov breathed a sigh of relief. Well, if it's you, a mission of that level shouldn't have any problems. Regarding Noah's strength, Makarov was more and more unable to see through him. However, even if he couldn't see through him, Makarov knew that Noah definitely wouldn't disappoint him. Not to mention, Noah didn't accept any extremely difficult mission. It wasn't even an S-rank mission. Even Kilda's accepted the scariest 100-year mission. Noah, whose strength was even higher than Kilda's, wouldn't be able to complete a mission that wasn't even an S-rank mission. That would be abnormal. Of course, it didn't rule out the possibility of accidents happening. Mira and Lisanna also came out from behind the bar. President. Mira gave Makarov a signature sweet smile. Is the regular meeting over? It's over. Makarov sighed. However, it's slightly troublesome. What's wrong? Lisanna hurriedly asked. Did something happen? Guild leader. Elisha also stepped forward and spoke in a deep voice. Is it related to what you just said? That sentence just now? Lucy swallowed her saliva and asked fearfully. Don't tell me they're really planning to crusade against the 3 dark guilds of the Baram Alliance? Noah also remembered what Makarov had said when he came in. He also looked at Makarov. Grandpa, did something happen? I believe all of you have already guessed the general situation. Makarov raised his head, his wrinkled face filled with a solemn expression. Due to the council's disbandment, many dark guilds have become active during this period. However, the various large guilds have also suppressed many of these dark guilds. Now, only a few extremely powerful dark guilds remain. As he said this, Makarov looked around at the entire fairy tale sorcerer. Just recently, during the regular meeting, the news of the Baram Alliance's dark guilds starting their activities was finally confirmed. So, do we really have to start the crusade against the Baram Alliance's dark guilds? Naz shouted excitedly. Great! Therefore, we must form an alliance and have Fairy Tale, Blue Pegasus, Lamia Scale, and Catch Shelter, these 4 major guilds jointly crusade against 6 demon generals. Oration cease. Fairy Tale. Blue Pegasus. Lamia Scale. Catch Shelter. No matter which guild it was, they were all considered to be one of the top guilds in the entire Fiori Kingdom. With these 4 guilds jointly crusading against 6 demon generals, it was indeed a lot more reassuring. And when everyone felt a little relieved, Noah's heart was raised instead. Catch Shelter? He remembered that Mishgang once said that Wendy was in Catch Shelter, right? While Noah was lost in thought, Makarov had already begun to give orders. This time, the 4 major guilds are acting together. We also need to send a small team. Moreover, if the opponent is one of the corners of the Baram Alliance, we must send an S-rank sorcerer. Makarov looked at Elisha. Elisha, You take Naz, Gray, and Lucy with you. I understand. Elusha responded heavily. I will let everyone return safely. Okay. Naz was so excited that he began to spit fire. I'm burning up. Really? The corners of Gray's mouth slowly rose. There's no other way. Lucy was almost in tears. Do I have to go too? Lucy. Even Harpy complained. Can you be any more cowardly? At this time, Noah raised his head and said to Makarov. Grandpa, let me join too. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.